Wizard, I can extract everything. Heath transmigrated to an alternate dimension and awakened the extraction system. With the help of the system, he steadily walked the path of the wizard to become a god. Feeble powers? No problem, the system can extract attributes. Not enough talent? No problem, the system can extract talent. Shabby bloodline? No problem, the system can extract the noblest of blood heritage. Everything and anything can be extracted. Chapter 1, Blood Rain Day. Greystone Castle, a baron's castle on the east side of Dark Cloud Forest. It belonged to the Noen family. Blood Rain Day. Women and children, hide in the castle. All men, bring your weapons and follow me to the battlements. Do not retreat. If anyone steps back, I will chop off his head. Night Thor shouted as he waved his cross sword. The castle was in a mess. The apprentice knights and the farmers who had taken refuge all took their swords, pitchforks, and hoes to the battlements. It was the day of the blood rain that happened once every 3 years. On this day, the black cloud that covered the sky of the dark cloud forest would rain blood like water. This blood rain had a special power. After being drenched by the blood rain, the demonized beasts that lived in the forest would go crazy and rush out of the forest to form a beast tide. Therefore, at this time, all the people in Greystone territory had to move into the castle to resist the beast tide. On one side of the battlements, there stood more than a dozen teenagers, about 13 to 14 years old. They were wearing leather armor with studded nails and carrying bright cross swords on their waists. These were apprentice knights of Greystone Castle and core members of the Noen family. At this moment, the flaxen-haired Caleb put his right hand on the black-haired Heath's shoulder and teased, "Hey, brother Heath, I saw you shivering. Why? Are you afraid?" Heath glanced at him and did not say anything. He was indeed afraid, but there was nothing shameful about it. Anyone who grew up in peaceful times would not be able to remain calm when they saw such a scene. Heath was not from this world. He came from a plane called Blue Star. He did not know how he came here. He only remembered that he was too tired from working overtime at the company 3 days ago, so he lay on his desk and slept for a while. However, when he woke up, he changed to another world. At the same time, he changed his identity. He changed from a 30-year-old urban white-collar worker to a 13-year-old apprentice knight in Greystone Castle. Before he could familiarize himself with his new identity, the Blood Rain Day had arrived. Then, he was driven up to the battlements by Night Thor with his cross sword. And now, the Baron is here. We have 2 knights, the Baron and Night Thor. They can even defeat a high-level demon beast. We will definitely win. At this moment, there was a commotion in the crowd. Everyone looked towards the stone stairs. A middle-aged man in his 40s walked towards them. He was wearing a chainmail and a blue cloth cover. He looked majestic. This was Baron Carter, the owner of this Greystone Castle. Baron Carter's appearance caused the crowd on the battlements to cheer enthusiastically. The fear in Heath's eyes also subsided a lot. This was because, in addition to his identity as a lord, Baron Carter was also a true knight. Knight. This was the collective name of the powerful humans in this world. It was also the ruling class of this world. Through practicing some special secret techniques, they were able to improve their physical fitness to a level that far exceeded that of ordinary humans. Any official knight possessed extremely astonishing combat strength. Heath had seen Baron Carter lift a huge rock that weighed at least a few hundred kilograms with his own eyes and split it in half with a single sword. With such a powerful person, and 2 of them at that, I should be able to survive this damn Blood Rain Day safely, Heath comforted himself in his heart. The Baron and Night Thor adjusted the formation on the battlements and then led the team to wait at the side. Time passed bit by bit, about half an hour later. Rumble. Suddenly, a loud rumble came from the horizon. The dark clouds floating above the forest suddenly spread out at an alarming speed, and in an instant, they covered the entire forest and even Greystone Castle. In the sky, there was a black mass. Drib. Drib. Then, the clear sound of raindrops rang out. The rain fell from the dark clouds. The rain was red, like blood. Heath raised his hand and looked at the red liquid on the back of his hand. What was this thing? Was it really not blood? It looked like blood, and it even had a pungent smell. Ding! Supernatural energy detected. Extracted. Supernatural extraction system activated. At this moment, a cold voice sounded in Heath's mind. Heath was shocked. What? Could it be that I'm hallucinating because I'm too nervous? Just as he had this thought, the voice sounded again, beep. Supernatural extraction system activated successfully. Immediately after, Heath's vision blurred and a row of data appeared in front of his eyes. Name, Heath Noen. Attributes, Strength 1.1, Agility 1.3, Vitality 0.9, Spirit 1.2, the average value of a normal adult man is 1. Heath was overjoyed. It really is the system. As a visitor from another world, Heath used to like reading online novels. Of course, it was impossible for him not to know what this system meant. Rumors say that all transmigrators must have a system. I thought it was just a legend, but it turns out to be true. The crisis was imminent. This system came at the right time. Heath immediately asked in his heart, Supernatural extraction system, what are your functions? Beep. Supernatural extraction system can extract energy from all supernatural substances to feed back to the host, including but not limited to attributes, skills, and knowledge. Usage requirements: 1. Must come into contact with the extract. 2. The extracted object must be supernatural substance. 3. The extracted object must not be a living thing. Heath was stunned. Supernatural substance? What was supernatural substance? Just as he was about to ask, there was a commotion on the battlements. It's coming. The beast tide is coming. Oh my god! So many! A thick layer of dust suddenly appeared in the forest in the distance. The dense dust was filled with demonized beasts. They came in groups and rolled over like a tide. The earth even began to tremble. Although they had mentally prepared themselves, at this moment, everyone on the battlements could not help but suck in a breath of cold air. Their faces could not help but turn pale. Baron Carter walked to the front and drew his cross sword. He said coldly, "Draw your sword and prepare for battle." With the battle imminent, Heath could only put aside the system's matters. He drew his cross sword and stood in a row with the other apprentice knights, silently watching the oncoming beast tide. 100 meters. 50 meters. 10 meters. The next second. Boom. A loud sound was heard. Countless demonized beasts crashed heavily into the city wall. The thick and heavy city wall obviously shook violently. The strong impact caused these demonized beasts to instantly turn into corpses and die at the bottom of the city wall. Later on, the demonized beasts stepped on these corpses and crashed into the higher part of the city wall. The corpses piled up at the bottom of the city wall, and soon, they reached the same height as the battlements. The demonized beasts behind them were also able to charge straight up the battlements. The battle had begun. Kill. Baron Carter took the lead and slashed forward with his cross sword. With a pu sound, the 3-meter-tall wild boar in front of him was actually split in half by the sword. Kill. 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 A cold murderous voice rang out. The morale of the people on the battlements was greatly boosted. One after another, they picked up their weapons and fought against these murderers. At the same time, Heath also welcomed his first battle in the other world. The one fighting with him was a ragdoll rabbit. This creature had nothing to do with the cute pets on Blue Star, and anyone who saw it would only think of terror. It looked like a ragdoll with coarse stitching. Dense black threads grew on its skin, and its eyes were simply 2 buttons. Although it was about the same size as ordinary domestic rabbits, it was extremely powerful. It had sharp teeth and sharp claws, and its movement speed was as fast as lightning. This was a species unique to this world, a demon creature. Legend had it that it was created by wizards using black magic. Whoosh! Whoosh! The sound of a cross-blade cutting through the air was heard. Heath brandished the cross-blade in his hand. After making contact with the ragdoll rabbit's claws twice, he finally waited for an opportunity to slash at the ragdoll rabbit's body. The defense of low-level demon beasts was mostly on par with that of ordinary animals. The sharp cross-blade successfully cut through the ragdoll rabbit's fur. The ragdoll rabbit, which had its stomach cut open, wriggled on the ground like a disgusting worm for a while and then stopped moving. After successfully taking down the first kill of the other world, Heath's anxiety eased a little. He wiped the blood off his face and prepared to run to the next enemy. However, at this moment, the system notification suddenly sounded. Beep. Supernatural substance can be extracted. Do you want to extract it? Heath was stunned and subconsciously said, extract. Beep. Host, please touch this supernatural substance. Supernatural substance? Was it talking about the ragdoll rabbit? As he guessed, Heath placed his hand on the ragdoll rabbit's corpse. Immediately, he felt a surge of energy from the ragdoll rabbit's body, which then surged into his body through his palm. His body seemed to become lighter. At the same time, the system's notification sounded again. Beep. Extraction successful. Agility plus 0.01. Chapter 2, Supernatural Extraction System. Attributes can be extracted directly. Heath felt that it was incredible. Before he could think about it, he heard a burst of laughter. Damn it, Heath, are you daydreaming? Are you daydreaming at a time like this? Baron Carter shouted at Heath at the top of his lungs. As he spoke, he slashed his sword forward, killing an intermediate demon beast two-headed dog in front of him. The head that was chopped off rolled to Heath's feet. Beep, discovered that host can extract supernatural substances. Do you wish to extract them? I can extract even if someone else killed it. Heath quickly reached out and touched the head. Extract. Beep, extraction successful. Agility plus 0.03. A warm current once again flowed through his palm towards Heath's body. His strength seemed to have increased. It really could be done. Once again, the extraction proved that it was not an illusion. For a moment, Heath could not help but be overjoyed. He looked at the demonized beasts charging up the city wall and the corpses on the ground, and a surge of excitement rose in his heart. If I extract all of these, my strength will also increase by a large margin. At this time, nothing can bring a person a sense of security like strength. As he thought about it, he did it. As he fought, he quietly extracted the attributes of the demonized beasts' corpses. During this process, he gained more knowledge about the use of his system. Firstly, the types of attributes. A single demonized beast could only extract one attribute. The types of attributes were more towards the strengths of the demonized beast itself. It was easier to extract the strength attribute if it was good at strength. Secondly, the level of the extracted attributes depended on the strength of the demonized beast. The stronger the demonized beast was, the higher the attributes it could extract. Currently, the extraction attributes were strength, agility, and vitality. As for the remaining spiritual energy, it had yet to be harvested. The blood rain continued, and the bitter battle continued. Heath was also rapidly shuttling through the battlefield, constantly improving himself through extraction. Beep, found supernatural substance can be extracted. Do you want to extract it? Extract. Beep, extraction successful. Strength plus 0.01. Beep, extraction successful. Agility plus 0.02. Beep, extraction successful. Vitality plus 0.01. With stronger strength, faster speed, and tougher body, Heath could feel his strength increasing rapidly every second. The other apprentice knights on the battlements felt that Heath was very different from before. His lively performance made the apprentice knights look at him. Even Baron Carter, who had been roaring at Heath, had his eyes lit up. After the battle, he looked at him several times. Roar! At this moment, a deafening roar came from afar. A huge beast appeared in the beast tide. It was a huge bear that was over 5 meters tall. It stood on the ground like a small mountain. When everyone saw this huge beast, they all sucked in a breath of cold air. A copper-skinned giant bear. A high-level magic beast, a copper-skinned giant bear. This isn't real. The crowd suddenly had a commotion. In front of such a huge beast, no one could maintain their composure. Baron Carter knew that the castle would be in danger once the formation was disrupted. He quickly said to Knight Thor, "Thor, hold your ground. Leave this damn beast to me." After saying that, he hacked a wild boar that was blocking the way and ran straight towards the huge beast. While he was running, a layer of faint milky white light suddenly gushed out from his body. The Baron's muscles became more muscular, and his whole body naturally emitted a powerful aura. Seeing this layer of light, the apprentice knight's eyes suddenly became fanatical. Because behind this layer of light was the goal that every apprentice knight pursued all their lives, life force. The apprentice knights could form a seed of life in their bodies through continuous training. Once this seed of life was activated, it would be extremely powerful. And forming a seed of life was also considered as advancing to an official knight. The Baron will definitely win. Kill! 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 A wave of surging cheers came from the top of the battlements. Along with the cheers of the crowd, Baron Carter also faced off against the copper-skinned giant bear that charged up the battlements. Ding! 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 The cross-shaped sword struck the giant bear's copper skin, causing the sound of metal clashing to ring out. The blade of the sword slashed across the copper skin, causing large sparks to fly. The copper-skinned giant bear. As its name suggested, the skin of this powerful demonized beast was as hard as copper and iron. Apart from that, it also possessed extremely powerful strength. It could easily tear a human into two halves. Such a giant beast was not something that an ordinary person could contend against. However, if it was a knight, the situation would be different. Similarly, as a species at the top of the food chain, knights possessed strength that was not inferior to the giant bear. They also possessed superior agility and a body that was equally tough. Even a giant beast like the copper-skinned giant bear would find it difficult to achieve such a feat. Because of this, after fighting for a few minutes, Baron Carter gradually gained the upper hand. He used his superior agility to pull out numerous wounds on the copper-skinned giant bear's body. Although these wounds were not fatal, they still caused the copper-skinned giant bear to bleed profusely. It was only a matter of time before it was defeated. The Baron will definitely win. Get rid of this monster. The morale of Greystone Castle was greatly boosted, and killing shouts resounded throughout the area. Looking at the battlefield where life and death were fighting, Heath felt a surge of inexplicable excitement and fervor in his heart. The strength of humans can actually reach such a level. It was clearly a huge beast that was like a small mountain, but at this moment, it was completely suppressed by the tiny humans. Every swing of its sword seemed to tear through the wind, and its momentum was like a rainbow. With such strength, it's no wonder these knights can live so comfortably. A desire rose in Heath's eyes. At the same time, the battle ahead had reached its climax. With the support of life force, the copper-skinned giant bear was soon beaten until its body was not intact, and blood gushed out like a pillar. Under the stimulation of the pain, its crazed eyes seemed to have regained clarity, and fear appeared in them. When the battle ended once again, it did not rush forward. Instead, it shrank back, as if it was going to escape. Baron, it's trying to escape. Baron Carter snorted lightly. It was obvious that he was not going to let the giant beast go. He exerted force with his legs and shot towards the copper-skinned giant bear like a cannonball. He raised his cross sword high, ready to give the giant beast a fatal blow. However, the copper-skinned giant bear, who was just trying to escape in fear, suddenly had a ruthless look in its eyes. Facing the Baron who was attacking, it opened its huge mouth and spat out a large mouthful of blood. The blood came very suddenly. Baron Carter, who was caught off guard, was instantly blinded, and his grasp of his physical senses was thrown into confusion. This is bad. The Baron cried out in his heart. Before he could get out of the predicament, the copper-skinned giant bear took a step forward, raised its claws, and smacked towards the Baron's head. If hit the Baron firmly, even a knight would die without a doubt. Baron, be careful. Everyone was shocked. At the moment of life and death, the Baron gritted his teeth. The seed of life exploded to its maximum, and his 5 senses instantly rose to another level. With his sharp senses, he immediately regained control of the battle. He moved to the side, and the copper-skinned giant bear's claws brushed past his head and smacked the Baron's shoulder. Although he dodged the fatal blow, the attack also hit the Baron hard. Everyone heard the clear sound of bones cracking, and the Baron spat out a mouthful of blood. However, the Baron was also a ruthless person. While he was seriously injured, he also took advantage of the opening of the middle section of the giant bear to swing his cross sword and cut the chest of the copper-skinned giant bear. Boom! A loud sound was heard. The Baron and the copper-skinned giant bear were both sent flying backward. It seemed that both sides suffered heavy losses. Sir Baron! The Baron crashed into the wall on one side. Knight Thor rushed up to check the situation. On the other side, the copper-skinned giant bear also crashed into the wall on the other side. This beast's vitality was extremely shocking. After suffering such a heavy blow, it actually did not die and stood up at the first moment. However, the Baron's sword had still caused it a great deal of damage. There was even a gash on its chest. One could even see the beating heart inside. Roar! The giant bear roared angrily. Its 4 paws flew towards the bottom of the wall. It seemed like it was about to escape. Although everyone could see that this giant beast was at the end of its tether, they were still afraid of such a huge creature. Facing the giant bear that was charging towards them, they all dodged to the sides. No one dared to stop it. seeing that the giant bear was about to escape, at this moment. Whoosh! Suddenly, a figure came from the side and suddenly appeared in front of the giant bear. It was Heath. The giant bear that was in a hurry to escape did not want to tangle with him. It just casually raised its giant palm and slapped towards Heath's head. However, this casual slap still contained a powerful force. Heath could even hear the whistling sound that cut through the air. It was cold and cruel. The sound made his heart beat faster, and saliva kept flowing out. Adrenaline exploded in his body. However, he still suppressed the urge to escape and tried to calm himself down. He stared at the palm, lowered his body, and lowered his head. The giant palm brushed past his scalp and almost lifted his skull. After the giant palm passed, the middle section of the giant bear opened. Heath roared in his heart, "Die!" At the same time, he raised the cross blade and stabbed at the beating heart. Poof! The cross blade pierced through the wound that the Baron had opened and stabbed at the beating heart. The fragile heart instantly exploded and blood sprayed all over Heath's face. The giant bear's huge body suddenly stopped, like a machine that had lost its electricity. With a loud rumble, it fell heavily to the ground. Huff! 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 The sound of heavy breathing could be heard. Heath wiped the blood off his face, and his eyes were a little crazy. Exciting, really exciting. After slightly calming himself down, he walked forward and pressed one hand on the giant bear's huge body. He silently chanted in his heart, "Extract." An unprecedented surge of energy instantly surged into Heath's body. In just an instant, Heath felt an incomparably powerful force. Beep! Extraction successful. Strength plus 0.3. Chapter 3, Golden Blood. This power lasted for quite a while before it finally calmed down. After shaking his hand, Heath could clearly feel that his power had increased by a large margin. As expected of a high-level demonized beast. The highest attributes that he had extracted before were less than 0.1, and most of them were even decimal points of double digits. However, this copper-skinned giant bear alone had contributed 0.3 of its power to Heath, which was equivalent to dozens of the previous ones. If I keep extracting like this, I'm afraid it won't take long for me to advance to a knight? Heath thought greedily. Fight! Fight! Kill! 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 The battle continued. The Baron was seriously injured and was carried away by the servants to rest. The next battle was under the command of Knight Thor. Greystone Castle had lost a knight, but fortunately, there were no more high-level demonized beasts in the next few demonized beast waves. If they were only middle-level or low-level ones, their threat was limited. Under the leadership of Knight Thor, they relied on the defense of the city wall to block wave after wave of attacks. The battle continued for about 2 hours, and the bloody rain in the sky gradually decreased. At the same time, the black clouds floating in the sky began to shrink rapidly, and finally returned to its original appearance, floating in the sky above the demonized forest in small pieces. The bloody rain stopped completely, and the beast tide came to an abrupt end. The demonized beasts that had regained their consciousness walked back to the forest. "Ha! We won! We won! We won!" The crowd cheered. Heath sheathed his cross sword and turned his head to look at the black cloud above the forest, his eyes full of curiosity. It was not like an ordinary cloud. It did not float 10,000 meters in the sky, but floated a few hundred meters above the forest, seemingly within reach. It was said that this dark cloud had existed since the beginning of the existence of this forest. Every 3 years, it would rain blood like today, and then it would shrink back. It would not float or dissipate. It was said that it was actually a magic beast. It was raised here by a wizard. Who knew? Greystone Castle, study. Knock, knock, knock. There was a knock on the door. "Come in." The door opened and Knight Thor walked into the room. The Baron was reading a book in front of the desk. Knight Thor bowed and said worriedly, "Baron, why are you up already? You should be lying on the bed right now." Baron Carter's face was still pale. He coughed and said, "Ahem, a small injury is not enough to kill the Lord of Greystone Castle. If I keep lying on the bed, the Knights of White Wolf Castle are much more ferocious than demonized beasts." Knight Thor held his sword and said fiercely, "If they dare to come, I will hang the heads of these dead dogs on the city wall." Baron Carter nodded with satisfaction. "I believe that the Knights of Greystone Castle are the most outstanding knights in River Valley. But it is not wise to act alone. We should have more companions." After a pause, he continued, these apprentice knights have been training in the castle for a year. They have proved their loyalty to me on the battlements. It is time to give them the secret manual of knights. Find an opportunity. Knight Thor nodded. Yes. Baron Carter then asked, what do you think of the other black-haired boy? There was only one black-haired apprentice knight. Of course, Knight Thor knew who Baron Carter was referring to. He thought for a moment and evaluated carefully. If it was before this, I would answer that he was ordinary, but the child's previous performance was indeed impressive. The Baron said, how about this, give him a bottle of golden blood. Knight Thor was shocked. Golden blood? Is the reward too expensive? The Baron shook his head. If it wasn't for the child's bravery, we would have lost a high-level demonized beast among our spoils of war. Brave people deserve to be praised. Knight Thor did not doubt him. Yes. At the same time, on the side of Greystone Castle, there were a few rows of carts on the empty ground. On the carts were piles of demonized beast corpses. There were even more demonized beast corpses scattered around. These were all left behind by the beast tide. They would be transported to nearby towns to be sold. Some of the money they earned would be used to make up for the losses of Greystone territory during the beast tide. The rest would be used to rush into the warehouse of Greystone Castle. At this moment, Heath was transporting the corpses of the demonized beasts to the palanquin, tidying up the corpses of the demonized beasts. This was a thankless job, and none of the apprentice knights were willing to participate, so he was the only one to do this job. Taking advantage of this opportunity, he also ruthlessly refreshed his attributes. Beep, extraction successful. Strength plus 0.01. Beep, extraction successful. Agility plus 0.02. Beep, extraction successful. Vitality plus 0.01. After this beast tide, there were hundreds of demonized beasts' corpses, and each of them could obtain attributes from them. After this round, Heath's three-dimensional attributes rose at a rocket-like speed. By the time the last demonized beast was sorted out, his three-dimensional attributes had already exceeded 2 points. What kind of concept was this? After the battle, Heath had summarized and sorted out the information about knights in this world, and classified the 3 attributes of each class. According to the data of the system, 3 people with an average value of more than 2 were equivalent to the standard of professional special forces on Earth. For example, there were probably no more than 5 apprentice knights who could reach this standard. If they were to train at a normal intensity, it would take at least half a year of hard work to increase so many attributes. Heath. At this moment, a shout came from the front. Kayla jogged over and said, Knight Thor has gathered everyone to the training ground. Are you done here? If you're late, you'll be punished badly. Knight Thor was known for being strict. Heath nodded and said, yes. Then, the 2 of them went to the training ground. Although the 2 of them had rushed over as soon as possible, they were still a little late. When they arrived here, the apprentice knights had already lined up neatly. Knight Thor stood at the front, obviously waiting for them for a while. We are doomed. Kayla muttered and hurriedly jogged over. He bowed nervously and said, Knight Thor. Unexpectedly, Sir Thor, who had always been strict, did not punish them at all this time. He only nodded slightly and said in a very easygoing manner, join us. This could not help but surprise the apprentice knights who were gloating and waiting for a good show. No way. When did Sir Thor become so easy to talk to? Their mutters quickly fell into Sir Thor's ears. Sir Thor immediately regained his usual dignity. Quiet. The apprentice knights clicked their tongues. There was a wooden box by the feet of Knight Thor. He kicked the wooden box to the front and said, it was the Baron's idea to call you here today. It has been almost a year since you entered Greystone Castle, and you have already mastered most of the basic knight training techniques. We have discussed it and think it is time to give you something new. Saying that, he kicked open the box. After opening the box, there were rolls of sheepskin scrolls inside. Knight Thor said, this is the core secret manual of the Noen family, Aura of Life and the accompanying sword technique Moon Cross Sword. Brian, go and distribute it to everyone. The apprentice knight's eyes suddenly became fervent. Aura of Life. Is the Baron going to teach us the Aura of Life? Am I dreaming? Thank you, Knight Thor. Thank you, Sir Baron. The secret manual of knights was an indispensable part of becoming a knight. Only by cultivating the secret manual of knights could one condense the seed of life and obtain the power of a knight. The secret manual of knights was always in the hands of the nobles. It was the dream of every apprentice knight to be able to cultivate a secret manual of knights. Soon, 2 scrolls were distributed to Heath. One was the secret manual of knights, Aura of Life, and the other was the sword technique, Moon Cross Sword. Heath first picked up the Aura of Life and looked at it. There were some complicated patterns on it with words. He tried to understand it, but he could not understand it at all. I wonder if this can be extracted. Thinking curiously, he tried to use the extraction skill on the scroll. Beep, extraction successful. Obtained knowledge, Aura of Life. Instantly, a mass of unfamiliar information surged into Heath's mind. He felt his head swell up, and there was a lot of unfamiliar knowledge in his head. It was the content related to the Aura of Life. Heath was extremely surprised. It really could be extracted. Now that he picked up the contents of the scroll, he could easily understand it, and he also knew the specific training method. Haha, if only I had this ability when I was learning a foreign language. Heath was extremely happy. Then, he extracted the other scroll of the Moon Cross Sword. Beep, extraction successful. Obtained sword technique Moon Cross Sword. At the same time, his head swelled up. He had already mastered the sword technique of the Cross Moon Sword. Meanwhile, the other apprentice knights were still frowning. What is written on this scroll? How should I start cultivating? Isn't this too difficult? I can't even understand it. Knight Thor said, you can take back the knight's secret manual and the sword technique. I'll explain it in detail in 2 days. I'll try to teach you in a month. There's no need to rush. After a pause, he took out a small glass bottle from his pocket. The glass bottle contained some golden liquid. He held the glass bottle and said, this is golden blood. As soon as Knight Thor finished speaking, there was a commotion in the crowd. What? The golden blood? Isn't that the legendary magical potion concocted by wizards with powerful magic? So it really exists. It's said that it can directly increase one's strength. Is that true? Golden blood, it was said that a magical potion concocted by a wizard could directly increase a knight's strength. Knight Thor continued, this is what the Baron asked me to bring. The reward is for apprentice knights who perform well. The apprentice knights' eyes turned red, and even their breathing became labored. Everyone wondered, who would be so lucky? Knight Thor did not keep everyone waiting. Under the watchful eyes of the crowd, he quickly gave a name. He said, Heath. Chapter 4, Attack. Heath was a little surprised, but he quickly walked forward. Knight Thor said, the Baron is very satisfied with your outstanding performance on the battlements. This is a reward for you. Keep up the good work and strive to become a knight as soon as possible. Heath took the golden blood. Yes. The apprentice knights were very envious. Knight Thor snorted. What are you looking at? If you want it, go and fight for it yourself. The Baron has never been stingy with outstanding apprentice knights. As long as you are outstanding enough, you all have a chance to obtain the golden blood. The apprentice knights said energetically, yes. Time passed in a flash. 3 months had passed very quickly. In the demonized forest, somewhere. Whoosh! Whoosh! The crisp sound of rushing wind could be heard. A young man with a longbow on his back was chasing a petrified wild boar. While running in the forest, Heath raised his longbow and pulled the bowstring in one go. With a whoosh, an arrow was shot at the petrified wild boar. The cold sound of the arrow alerted the petrified wild boar. Its fur suddenly tightened, and a layer of stone-like grayish-white substance immediately appeared on the surface of its skin. The entire wild boar seemed to have turned into a stone statue. This was the ability of the petrified wild boar. When it encountered danger, it could tighten its fur and temporarily obtain a defensive power comparable to that of a stone. The arrow hit the petrified wild boar's skin, and with a crack, the arrowhead broke into 2. It seemed that it was unable to break through the petrified wild boar's defense. Seeing this, Heath could not help but snort coldly, and once again pulled the bowstring. This time, after pulling the bowstring into a full moon, he was not in a hurry to shoot. Instead, he held the bowstring tightly and continued to aim at the petrified wild boar. At the same time, a layer of faint silvery white light gushed out from the surface of his body and quickly moved along his palm towards the bowstring in his hand. As long as there were apprentice knights present, they would definitely be able to recognize the meaning of this light at a glance. It was the power that all apprentice knights dreamed of. Knight. Whoosh! The cold sound of an arrow exploding once again sounded, but it was more than several times sharper than before. The arrow left a visible cold light in the air as it shot towards the petrified wild boar in front of it. Although the petrified wild boar's fur had been tightened and petrified at the first moment, the arrow wrapped in white light still tore through its fur and plunged into its flesh. Boom! The petrified wild boar, which weighed over 100 jin, was actually lifted up from the ground by this arrow. It crashed heavily into the grass in front of it like a cannonball. Heath chased after it and pushed aside the grass. Soon, he saw the corpse of the petrified wild boar. There was a big hole in its chest, and it was completely dead. As expected of the strength of a knight. Looking at the wound, Heath nodded in satisfaction. For the past 3 months, he had been hunting in the demonized forest every day and enhancing his attributes by extracting skills. After 3 months of continuous effort, he had successfully condensed the seed of life in his body last night and became a true knight. Heath placed one hand on the petrified wild boar and said, "Extraction." Beep, extraction successful. Vitality plus 0.01. Beep. Host's current attributes are, Strength 5.1, Agility 5.3, Vitality 5.0, Spirit 1.2. A knight's 3-dimensional average value of more than 5 points was the symbol of a knight. Don't think that it was easy. Take the apprentice knights who entered Greystone Castle at the same time as him as an example. Among them, the most talented and hard-working one had a 3-dimensional average value of fewer than 3 points. Heath carried the petrified wild boar and turned around to walk back. Demonized beasts could be sold for money. Rustle. At this moment, a slight rustling sound was heard. The bushes in front suddenly shook. At the same time, Heath suddenly felt a dangerous aura. He hurriedly threw away the wild boar and jumped to the side to avoid it. Whoosh! Almost at the same time he moved aside, a sharp sound of rushing wind could be heard. An arrow flew out from the bushes and brushed past his head, almost piercing his skull. A slightly surprised sneer could be heard from the bushes. "Yo, kid, your reaction is not bad." Then, a figure walked out from the bushes. He was a male, about 20 years old. He was short and dressed in black leather armor. There was a white wolf's head emblem embroidered on his chest. "Barden, damn you! Didn't we agree to capture him alive? You almost shot his head with an arrow." Another voice could be heard. Another figure walked out from the bushes. This time, it was a burly man with a double-edged axe in his hand. He was also wearing black leather armor and had a white wolf's head emblem embroidered on his chest. Heath frowned and asked coldly, "You're from White Wolf Castle? You trespassed into Greystone Castle's territory without permission. Are you trying to start a war?" White Wolf Castle was another noble's territory in River Valley, and its territory was adjacent to Greystone Castle. The relationship between the two sides had never been good. This time, it was even more unpleasant because of the ownership of a new Greystone mine found on the border. It was obvious that the two of them did not intend to hide their identities. After hearing Heath's question, the short man pulled out his cross-shaped sword and taunted as if nothing had happened, "Ha ha ha, so what if I am? What? Do you cowards of Greystone Castle still dare to resist?" The burly man next to him grabbed his huge axe and cursed, "Why are you talking so much nonsense with him? Hurry up and chop off his limbs and bring them back. That little bitch I just caught is still waiting for me to do it. Don't waste time here." Heath sneered. "Kill me? Then let's see if you have the ability to do it." After saying that, he did not waste any more words. He pulled out his cross-shaped sword and took the lead in launching an attack. The burly man laughed out loud. Just in time. After saying that, he raised his double-edged axe and swung it forward from top to bottom. The huge axe was 1.5 meters long and weighed at least 100 kilograms. Under the swing of the burly man, the air seemed to explode. With this axe swing, it was likely that a petrified wild boar would be split into 2 halves. However, Heath did not dodge this terrifying attack. Instead, he swung his sword forward. It was as if he wanted to compete in strength. The strong man could not help but laugh. He had never lost in a competition of strength among people of the same level. In the next second, the two weapons collided in the air. Clang! The sound of metal colliding was as dull as a gong. The burly man's smile froze on his face. This was because when the two weapons collided, he only felt a huge force that seemed to be able to topple mountains and overturn seas. It shook his thumb and forefinger so much that it almost did not leave his hand. Thump! 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 The burly man took more than 10 steps back. The skinny man said in astonishment, "Clive, what the heck are you doing? Didn't you say that you're not playing?" The burly man waved his hand and said in surprise, "That kid is very strong." The skinny man's face turned serious. He knew Clive's strength very well. Even among apprentice knights, he was at the top of his class. Strength was his forte, almost comparable to an official knight. Now that he had lost in a head-on fight, it was enough to prove that this apprentice knight in front of him was extraordinary. When did Greystone Castle produce another genius? As he guessed in his heart, he pulled out his crossblade and stood behind Heath, flanking Clive. He said gloomily, "Genius? I like to slaughter geniuses." The battle began again. Clang! 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 The sound of metal clashing exploded in the forest, and large sparks flew in the air. Even though it was 1 against 2, Heath was not at a disadvantage. The cross-shaped sword in his hand drew out streaks of cold light in the air, striking the two until they could not raise their heads. After the two sides had tangled for less than 10 rounds, Heath seized a flaw in the burly man's speed and directly cut off half of his head with a sword. The remaining thin and small man's hair stood on end when he saw this. He had no desire to fight at all and ran away without thinking. Heath did not chase after him. He picked up the longbow that was still on the ground, pulled the bowstring, and shot an arrow out. Whoosh! With a sharp whistling sound, the sharp arrow flashed in the air. With a pu sound, the arrowhead pierced through the thin man's chest. Lowering his head to look at the faint silvery white glow that covered the arrowhead, the thin man's eyes were filled with confusion and unwillingness. "Knight! Knight!" He opened his mouth and spat out a mouthful of blood. Then, he fell to the ground and followed in the footsteps of his companion. Heath wiped the blood splattered on his face and walked forward. "I wonder if I can extract from humans." As he guessed in his heart, he placed his hand on the brawny man's corpse and chanted in his heart, "Extract." Beep! Extraction successful. Strength plus 0.1. Beep! Extracted White Wolf killing technique. Beep! Extracted White Wolf battle aura. Heath's eyes lit up. It's really possible, and I managed to extract so much at once. Not only did his strength increase by 0.1, but he even obtained 2 treasures, White Wolf killing technique and White Wolf battle aura. One had to know that this was the secret manual for White Wolf Castle to train knights, and it was the greatest capital for the Bane family to establish their foothold in River Valley. Then, Heath extracted from the other man, but this time, he only gained a 0.1 agility bonus. It seems that I can't obtain the same knowledge again. Shaking his head, Heath stopped thinking and looked at the 2 corpses. "I'll study them later. I'll take their heads back to the castle first." Chapter 5, War. After taking the 2 corpses back to the castle, Heath found out that the 2 apprentice knights he had killed were quite famous in the White Wolf Castle. They were expected to become knights within 1 or 2 years. At this moment, Greystone Castle was in an uproar. Clive the Butcher. Barton the Dwarf. Heath killed them both by himself. My God, isn't this too much? Didn't I hear that both of them are about to become knights? The apprentice knights were shocked, including Baron Carter and Knight Thor, who was also stunned for a while. Because he was worried that his rapid advancement would lead to unnecessary trouble, Heath did not tell anyone about his advancement to a knight. Until now, everyone still thought that he was just an apprentice knight. Baron Carter came back to his senses and said in surprise, "This was all done by you alone?" Heath nodded. "They underestimated the enemy too much." Baron Carter said, "Even if the enemy's arrogance left a flaw, you were able to defeat them in 1 versus 2. This also shows your strength." After a pause, he said with certainty, "I think your strength is not far from that of a knight. Advancing in a year is almost certain, or even faster." Wow! Advancing to a knight within a year, then doesn't that mean that he advanced to a knight within 2 years of training? Hiss! Advancing to a knight within 2 years of training, such a genius is not unheard of in the entire Rodan kingdom, right? The effect of the golden blood is really too terrifying. The crowd was once again in an uproar. Baron Carter looked at Heath, and the more he looked, the more satisfied he became. At this moment, he suddenly saw a small gap on Heath's crossguard sword. He could not help but ask, "Is your crossguard sword broken?" Heath said, "It was left behind during the battle." The strength of the double-edged axe was indeed extraordinary. Although he could gain the upper hand in a head-on confrontation, the weapon was somewhat unable to withstand it. Baron Carter immediately took off the crossguard sword on his body and handed it over. This black dragon will belong to you from now on. The apprentice knights were all envious. Baron Carter's black dragon sword was tailor-made for Baron Carter by a very famous blacksmith master in River Valley. It was also made of the best material, fine steel. It had followed Baron Carter in battle for many years and was very famous as a treasured sword. Heath did not stand on ceremony. He took the cross-shaped sword and expressed his gratitude. The Baron nodded and said, "No need to stand on ceremony. Warriors who have defended the dignity and safety of Greystone Castle should be rewarded. This is what you deserve, child." After a pause, he continued, "All right, everyone, go back to training. I have something to discuss with Knight Thor." The apprentice knights left one after another. After the crowd dispersed, Baron Carter's face darkened. He looked at the two corpses on the ground and sneered, "These dead dogs of the White Wolf Castle are really persistent. It seems that it's impossible to make peace with them." This was not the first time such a situation had happened today. Recently, the towns under the jurisdiction of Greystone Castle had been repeatedly attacked by the people of the White Wolf Castle. Previously, a little girl had accidentally stepped into the territory of the White Wolf Castle while picking mushrooms. She had been captured and killed by them in an extremely cruel way. A little girl who was only 12 years old was abused by more than a dozen men. In the end, she was cooked in a pot and sent to Greystone Castle. Knight Thor also said angrily, "They are provoking us. Sir Baron, why don't I bring 2 people to White Wolf Town to kill them?" The Baron shook his head, "No. There was only one town under the jurisdiction of White Wolf Castle, so it was easy to defend. There were 3 towns under the jurisdiction of Greystone Castle, so it was impossible to guard against them. In the end, he would only be at a disadvantage if they took revenge on each other." The Baron said, "What they want is a war. In that case, I'll give them a war. Arrange for someone to send a message to Hall and Blue. Also, get the apprentice knights to prepare." Hall and Blue were the other 2 knights under the Baron. They usually stayed in the farmhouse given by the Baron and he would only summon them into the castle when there was a serious situation. After a pause, he said decisively, "Send a letter of challenge." Half a month later, on the Ruling Plains. The Ruling Plains was a plain in the middle of River Valley. Whenever there was an irreconcilable conflict between the 2 families in River Valley, they would lead the family knights to resolve it through war here. At this moment, 2 square formations had been set up on the Ruling Plains. On the left side were people from Greystone Castle, led by Baron Carter and his 3 knights, followed by dozens of apprentice knights, and then hundreds of civilians and farmers. The team from White Wolf Castle was standing on the opposite side. They obviously had fewer people than those from Greystone Castle, but they could not be careless because they had a total of 5 knights. Baron Carter sneered. "Fergus, that sly fox. He's everywhere. I was wondering why these little dogs from White Wolf Castle suddenly had the courage to accept my challenge. It really is Fergus, that old fox." There were only 3 knights from White Wolf Castle, and the 2 extra knights were from another River Valley noble, the Fergus family. The 2 extra knights immediately caused a commotion in Greystone Castle. Kayla, who was standing next to Heath, cursed, "Those shameless bastards of the Bane family even asked for outside help in the Holy War. Is White Wolf Castle selling all the women to the Fergus family? How could they be so eager to help them? They even brought out the only 2 knights. Bastard!" The wars in this world were played with high-end combat power. An official knight could already decide the outcome of a war on such a scale. In the crowd, Heath held his cross sword and frowned. He was not interested in war or glory, but as an apprentice knight of Greystone Castle, he had to step forward. Otherwise, there would be no place for him in the entire River Valley and even the entire Rodan Kingdom. "First, I need to ensure my own safety. Then, I'll see if I can get ahead," Heath decided silently. Although Baron Carter treated him well, it was not enough for him to work for him. On the Ruling Plains, more people came one after another. However, there were not many of them. Each group consisted of about 3 to 10 people. They did not have any intention of participating in the war. Instead, they stood on one side of the plains. These were the nobles of River Valley. They were here to witness the war. Soon, the agreed time for the war arrived at noon. The Baron walked toward the center of the formation. The Lord of White Wolf Castle also walked over. An elder noble also walked out from the noble group. This was the final mediation. If the mediation was successful, the war could be avoided. Otherwise, it would be using the sword to speak. And obviously, the mediation this time was a failure. The Baron walked back to the camp. He said to everyone in disbelief, "These bastards of the Bane family are prepared not to pay a single copper coin for Ollie's death. They also require us to offer 15 virgins from each town. In addition, their knights have to come to the town once a month to have fun." After a pause, he said angrily, "Tell me, what is your answer?" Everyone's eyes turned red. "Kill! Kill! Kill!" Baron Carter pulled out his cross-sword and raised it high. He said angrily, "It's time to defend our dignity. Brothers of Greystone territory, follow me." Chapter 6, Charge! 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 The battle cries shook the sky, and war was about to break out. Both sides rushed towards each other at this moment. Knights and apprentice knights raised their cross-swords high, while commoners and farmers held hoes, rakes, pitchforks, and all sorts of weapons. 100 meters. 50 meters. 10 meters. Both sides could already see each other's red eyes. In the next second. Boom! With a loud sound, 2 waves of people and horses crashed into each other like a torrent. The farmers who were close to the main formation were the first to suffer. They were killed on the spot by the knights of both sides who swept past them with a few swords. Their pitchforks, rakes, and hoes were as fragile as white paper. After the obstacles were cleared, it was time for the real confrontation. Knights versus knights, apprentice knights versus apprentice knights, farmers versus farmers. This was an unspoken rule in a holy war. Knights would not take the initiative to slaughter apprentice knights, and apprentice knights could not take the initiative to go to the farmers' war zone either. Each of them could only fight against an evenly matched opponent. If someone did not abide by the rules, even if they won the war, they would be despised by others, and would not be tolerated by the nobles of the Rodan kingdom. Ding, ding, ding. The sound of metal interweaving rang out. The cross-shaped sword in Heath's hand was repeatedly brandished and tangled with the enemy in front of him. Restricted by the rules of the war, the people fighting with him at this moment were naturally some apprentice knights. With his knight-level strength, he was like a tiger entering a flock of sheep in this battle circle. If he used his full strength, he could easily cut a large area. However, he didn't do that. Instead, he carefully hid his strength and even pretended that he was in a tough battle. Again, this war had nothing to do with him. It was impossible for him to work for him. "Are you the black-haired genius who defeated the butcher and the dwarf?" At this moment, a contemptuous voice sounded. An apprentice knight of White Wolf Castle taunted Heath, "Sure enough, you're just a kid who got lucky. With your level, how can you be called a genius?" This was a very famous genius of White Wolf Castle. His name was Andrew. At the age of 17, he had already reached the peak of the apprentice knight level. There were rumors that he was very likely to become the youngest knight of White Wolf Castle. Heath had originally intended to pick an opponent to gradually leave the battlefield. Seeing that he came to provoke him, he immediately retaliated without giving in. "I don't know if I'm a genius or not. But it's more than enough to kill a dog like you." Andrew said angrily, "Good, good, good. I'd like to see what kind of ability you, this arrogant kid, have. Move aside. This kid is mine." The talented and arrogant Andrew immediately charged at Heath with his sword. Heath did not dodge at all. He brandished his sword and fought with him. The surrounding apprentice knights did not interfere in the battle between the two of them. They stepped aside one after another and soon, there was an empty space for the two of them to fight in. Taking advantage of this opportunity, Heath pretended that he could not fight as he retreated while fighting. He tried his best to move to the outside of the battlefield. It was too close to the center of the battlefield, and it was still too dangerous. Andrew did not know what Heath was thinking. When he saw that Heath wanted to escape, he thought that he was a coward. He immediately chased after him foolishly and said arrogantly, "Little trash, can you run?" Heath sneered. "Even a dog butcher has to run away." The two of them fought again. At the same time, the war had reached its climax. The farmers were bleeding and exhausted. One by one, they fell to the ground, but they did not have much strength as ordinary people. Of course, their strength was only a little, but the reason why they lost so quickly was because they were like Heath. They did not have much energy to focus on the war. The war belonged to the nobles, and their lives were their own. It was almost enough. If they won, would the serfs lose? There was no reason for them to lose their lives, was there? It was not just the serfs. Even the apprentice knights seemed to be in danger, but in fact, they were also fighting carefully with 9 parts defense and 1 part attack. The knights were the ones who really fought to the death. After all, their victory or defeat determined the ownership of the castle, the farm, and the women. This was the real war. At this moment, the war in the Knight Circle was divided into 2 parts. One was Baron Carter, who was facing the siege of 3 knights. The other was Baron Bane of White Wolf Castle, who was fighting against the 3 knights of Greystone Castle with one of his knights. The outcome of the war was determined in these 2 circles. One of the White Wolf knights shouted at Baron Carter, "Carter, surrender. Hand over the Greystone mine and leave one hand. We promise not to make things difficult for you." Baron Carter laughed. "Ha ha ha. You little dogs want my head." Another knight of the Fergus family said coldly, "Humph, Knight Newman, there's no need to talk nonsense with him. The 3 of us are fighting against him. Are you afraid that he'll run away? Just chop off his head as soon as possible." The remaining knight said, "Knight Roya is right. Since Carter is here today, then don't even think about getting out alive." The 3 of them suddenly became fierce in their attacks. They were all knights, and their strength was on par with each other. In this 3-on-1 situation, Baron Carter was soon at a disadvantage, and there were even several wounds on his body. It was inevitable that the Baron would lose, but at this moment, a strange light suddenly flashed across his neck. Although it was only for a moment, it was still seen by Knight Roya of the Fergus family. His body shook violently, and his vigilance increased greatly. That is. At the same time, Heath, who was outside the battle circle, suddenly felt a strong aura coming from Baron Carter's side. He subconsciously looked in that direction, and when he saw it, his pupils suddenly shrank. Baron Carter seemed to have changed into a different person all of a sudden. An extremely strong aura burst out from his body, and milky white air currents that were as thick as milk gushed out directly from the surface of his body. Under the nourishment of the milky white air currents, the wounds on Baron Carter's body healed at a speed visible to the naked eye. There was a golden glow mixed in the milky white air currents. The surrounding knights were shocked and blurted out a term, Grand Knight. Grand Knights were a class above knights, and this milky white air current was the manifestation of the full activation of life force. This was something only Grand Knights could do. And that golden glow was also the manifestation of a Grand Knight's unique power after sublimation. Without the slightest hesitation, the 3 knights immediately said, "Run." The 3 of them instantly fled in 3 different directions. The difference between a Grand Knight and a knight was like the difference between a knight and a farmer. It was an increase in strength, speed, and vitality in all aspects. A knight had no chance of winning in front of a Grand Knight, and could only be slaughtered. "Can you escape?" Baron Carter sneered and caught up with the Knight of White Wolf Castle like a hurricane. He swung his cross-shaped sword forward and slashed out a substantial sword aura from 3 to 5 meters away. The sword aura was as cold as frost. It cut the White Wolf Knight's body rapidly. With a miserable scream, half of the White Wolf Knight's body was cut into 2 pieces. The Baron did not stop. He once again caught up with the second knight and followed the same pattern and slashed out another sword aura. This time, the sword aura was obviously much dimmer than before. However, it still left a deep wound on the back of this knight that could see the bones. His internal organs were also torn into pieces. He fell to the ground and his body was twitching. It seemed that he would not survive. The Baron did not stop. In the end, he caught up with the external aid of the Fergus family and threw out another sword aura. Having learned from the previous 2 companions, Knight Roya was more prepared. When he saw the Baron attacking, he quickly swung his sword to block. Clang! The sound of metal interweaving could be heard. Knight Roya felt as if his entire body had been heavily hit by a speeding carriage. He flew out and crashed heavily on the ground. All the bones in his body seemed to fall apart. He did not die from the first strike. The Baron continued to chase after him and was prepared to follow up with another strike. However, those 3 strikes seemed to have exhausted all his strength. He had just raised his crossguard sword when his arm trembled involuntarily. His body swayed and he knelt on one knee on the ground with the crossguard sword in hand. Knight Roya, who was still in shock, hurriedly stood up. He glanced at the Baron, who seemed to be unable to move. However, he did not have the courage to attack. Instead, he dragged his injured body and left. This scene fell into Heath's eyes. His eyes could not help but light up. Chapter 7, Insidious. There was no reason not to take the merit that came to him. After thinking about it, Heath quickly made a decision. He immediately changed his previous style of only defending and not attacking and repeatedly swung his sword at Andrew in front of him. Andrew, who had always thought that he had the upper hand, was shocked. Under the sudden and fierce attack of Heath, he almost got hurt. He had to use all his strength to avoid it. Looking at the tear on his clothes, he could not help but break out in cold sweat. He could not help but say, if he had not reacted fast enough and almost got ambushed by this kid, he would have used such a despicable method like he did to kill the butcher and the dwarf. Little did he know that the only reason he survived was that Heath did not intend to kill him. He just wanted to force him to retreat. After forcing Andrew to retreat, Heath did not waste any more words. He turned around and chased after the Knight Roya. Andrew hesitated for a moment and then chased after him with a gloomy face. He had come to participate in this war to make a name for himself. Now, because he chose the target of Heath, he did not get a single head. Naturally, there was no reason to let him go. Andrew gritted his teeth and said, "Damned bastard, I'll cut you into pieces and feed you to the dogs." The two of them chased each other and soon entered the forest in front of them. Heath chased into the depths of the forest. The ground was covered in blood, so it was very easy to track him down. He chased all the way to an empty area. Heath stopped in his tracks. Through the sparse shrubs, he could clearly see a figure lying inside. It was Knight Roya, who was covered in blood. Knight Roya also noticed the person outside the bushes at the first moment. He exclaimed, "Who is it?" As he spoke, he gripped his crossguard sword tightly. Heath walked through the bushes and into the open space. He introduced himself, "Apprentice Knight of Grey Castle, Heath Noen." Upon hearing that it was an apprentice knight and a young face, Knight Roya's guard was lowered by half. He said impatiently in a cold voice, "Get lost." Heath did not waste any more words and raised his cross sword in a starting position. Knight Roya was stunned. He thought that there was something wrong with his eyes. "What is this apprentice knight doing? He wants to challenge me." Knight Roya said, "With just you." Heath said, "I want to give it a try." Knight Roya was so angry that he laughed. "Good, good, good. Greedy brat, you want my head to make a name for yourself, right? If you have the ability, then come and take it." As he spoke, he stood up and casually placed the cross sword by his feet with one hand. It was both contempt and disdain, but it was also confidence. A knight's confidence against an apprentice knight. Day. 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 Footsteps sounded. Heath held the cross sword with both hands and charged towards Knight Roya. Knight Roya's eyes lit up. His posture was standard and his lower body was stable. He was an outstanding apprentice knight. But he was still only an apprentice knight. Knight Roya held his sword with one hand and swung it upwards. Clang! A cold metallic sound rang out. Heath's body shook and he was sent flying backward. He crashed heavily into a tree trunk. Knight Roya said coldly, "Get lost." He was injured and he did not want to be entangled with Heath. Heath stood up again in pain. He hesitated for a moment but did not leave. Instead, he raised his cross sword again. "I want to try again." Knight Roya sneered. "You don't know death." Day. 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 The sound of footsteps could be heard. Heath charged towards Knight Roya again. Dang! Heath was once again sent flying by Knight Roya's casual swing of the sword. This time, he flew even further. Knight Roya did not even look at Heath. He simply leaned against the tree trunk and sat down again. The vigilance on his body was completely relaxed. It was already confirmed that this was an apprentice knight, and also just an apprentice knight. A knight was undefeatable to an apprentice knight. Hoo-hoo! Heath stood up again. The sound of his breathing was obviously heavier. He stared in the direction of Knight Roya. The greed in his eyes had been replaced by solemnity. He hesitated for a long while. It seemed that he had made a great struggle in his heart before he finally raised his sword again. Knight Roya snorted lightly. "You're courting death." Day. 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 The sound of footsteps sounded again. 30 meters. 10 meters. 5 meters. Knight Roya gripped his sword tightly and was prepared to finish off this reckless apprentice knight once and for all. But at this moment, a silver-white light suddenly bloomed in front of Knight Roya's eyes. Knight Roya's pupils suddenly contracted, and his head exploded with a bang. "This is..." He hurriedly held his sword with both hands and changed his stance. However, the previous relaxation had made him completely unprepared. It was no longer realistic to change his move at the last minute, and the final result was whoosh. Like a phantom, it brushed past Knight Roya's body. Heath held his sword with both hands and appeared a few meters behind Knight Roya. Blood was dripping from the blade of the sword. Knight Roya widened his eyes. There was a gash on his neck, and blood was gushing out. He opened his mouth and said in shock, anger, and unwillingness, Knight. Knight. As soon as he said that, he fell to the side with his eyes wide open. Huff, huff, huff. Heath panted and calmed the nervousness in his heart. Although both sides were knights, a newly promoted knight like him could not be compared with a knight like Roya who had been promoted for many years. Even if the other party was injured, he was not confident of winning. If he did not use a trick to make the other party lower his guard, he definitely would not win. Despicable? Maybe. As long as he could achieve his goal, Heath had never minded the process and means. Moreover, Heath did not think that a guy who had the face to fight 3 against 1 would be much nobler than him. After a short rest, Heath walked over and placed one hand on Knight Roya's body. He silently chanted in his heart, extract. Beep, successful extraction. Agility plus 0.5. Beep, extracted Rose sword technique. Beep, extracted Rose secret manual. A surge of power surged into his body. Heath felt his body become much lighter, and 2 more pieces of information appeared in his head. As expected of an official knight, Heath was extremely happy. I wonder how much contribution the other 2 knights who were killed by the Baron can give me. As he was thinking, a strange sound suddenly came from ahead. Rustle. Heath raised his head and saw a figure standing outside the open space. Andrew. At this moment, Andrew was standing outside the open space without moving. Obviously, he was stunned. He was both shocked and confused. Was this the apprentice knight whom he had suppressed for hundreds of rounds? Was this the kid who was in danger under his sword? Other than that, he was more terrified. How could he be a knight? How could he be a knight? Their eyes intertwined. Heath said, "Did you see it?" Andrew was extremely terrified. There was only one thought in his mind. Run. He did not hesitate at all and turned around to leave. However, compared to a knight, an apprentice knight's speed was really too slow. With a swoosh, Andrew only felt a strong wind coming from behind. Then, he felt as if he was flying high into the sky. Below, his headless body fell to the ground. Heath put away his cross sword and walked forward, performing extraction as usual. Beep, extraction successful. Agility plus 0.05. Beep, extraction successful. Knight talent plus 1. Current knight talent, 5, rating, medium. Heath's eyes widened. Talent could be extracted. He opened his mouth. This is too insane. Chapter 8, Miracle Sword. By the time Heath returned to the battlefield with the heads of the 2 men, the war had already ended. On the side of White Wolf Castle, aside from a Fergus family foreign aide who was subdued by Knight Thor, the rest of the knights, including Baron Bane, were all killed. On the side of Greystone Castle, Knight Hall was killed by Baron Bane's desperate counterattack. The remaining knights were all injured, but their lives were not injured. The one with the most serious injuries seemed to be Baron Carter. For some reason, there were no external injuries on his body, but he was very weak. He even needed the help of an apprentice knight to barely stand. Is it related to the power of the Grand Knight that he unleashed earlier? Heath guessed secretly. Heath, who returned to the battlefield with 2 heads, immediately caused a stir. Knight. Heath killed a knight? And cut off his head. Unbelievable. Unbelievable. Heath killed a knight. Heath killed a knight. Andrew, a genius of the same age who had been famous for a long time, was not mentioned. Roya was a real knight. An apprentice knight killing a knight was like a myth. No bard would dare to write such a story. Baron Carter asked in surprise, "How did you do it, Heath?" Heath explained, "When I found him, he was already dying." Hearing Heath's words, the eyes of the apprentice knights were red to death. Killing a knight was such a great achievement. They did not know how to describe such luck. Baron Carter was skeptical. His reason told him that his sword was already spent and should not be so powerful. However, he could not think of another reason why an apprentice knight could kill a knight. It should be luck plus a sneak attack. Thinking of this, Baron Carter smiled and said, "Ha ha ha, you are really a lucky boy. You always create miracles." Miracle boy, miracle sword. Miracle sword. Miracle sword. The crowd cheered. The war ended with the victory of Greystone Castle without a doubt. After the war, Baron Carter divided the White Wolf territory into two parts. One part was the original territory of the White Wolf territory. This part was inherited by a daughter of Baron Bane. She was exactly 13 years old this year and had reached the legal age of marriage in Rodan Kingdom. She would hold a wedding ceremony under Night Thor. The remaining part of the territory was the dowry that Baroness Bane had brought over. This part of the territory belonged to Baroness Bane legally, but she would be married to Sir Hall's son. In the end, Baron Carter would be in charge of the real rule. All of Baron Bane's sons were executed, and all the daughters except those who married outside were rewarded. The other rewards were numerous, ranging from knights to apprentice knights, and even serfs. This was the way of the world. The winner had absolute control over the loser. In a real sense, the winner would win the beauty and wine, but the loser would lose everything. A few days later, it was night. Heath's room in Greystone Castle. The apprentice knights used to live in a group dormitory, but because of Heath's outstanding performance, Baron Carter arranged a room for him after the war. It was on the second floor of the castle, facing the demonized forest. The room was not big, but it had an independent bathroom. There was also a bath in the bathroom, which made Heath very satisfied. Sizzle. The suet candles were burning. Heath was sitting in front of his desk. There were a few books in front of him, which he had borrowed from the study. Beep, extraction successful. Obtained knowledge, general history of the Ike continent. Beep, successful extraction. Obtained knowledge, geographical guide to the Ike continent. Beep, successful extraction. Obtained knowledge, selected books of the royal family of the Rodan Kingdom. Beep, successful extraction. These books helped Heath greatly. The original owner of this body had a very low understanding of this world. He did not even understand how big his kingdom was. Through the extraction of these books, he finally had a vague understanding of the world he had transmigrated to. First of all, the land he was on was called the Ike continent. Although it was called a continent, its geographical area was about the size of the British peninsula on Blue Star. However, there seemed to be more land overseas. Perhaps this was also a peninsula. The social formation here was similar to the Middle Ages in Western Europe. The development process was between the 13th and 15th centuries. There was a slight difference depending on the region. Knock, knock, knock. At this moment, there was a knock on the door. Heath walked forward and opened the door. Outside the door, there was a girl wearing a black and white maid's dress. She held a suet candle in one hand and a bowl of hot milk in the other. He had never seen her before. She seemed to be the new maid in the castle. She said timidly, "Sir. Sir, I came to bring you milk." Heath nodded and opened the door. He pointed at the desk and said, "Put it there." After saying that, he went back to the desk and continued reading. The young girl walked over and put the milk on the desk, but she did not leave. Instead, she stood on the side of the desk. Heath raised his eyebrows and looked up. "Is there anything else?" The young girl hesitated for a moment. Out of Heath's expectations, she suddenly took off her maid's dress. She was not wearing anything underneath. After taking off her maid's dress, she stood naked in front of Heath. Heath was stunned. The young girl's face was red as she said nervously, "Sir. Sir, Sir Baron. Instructed me to be your personal maid." Personal maid. That was a nice way of putting it. In fact, the main job was to sleep with him. It was a tool for the nobles to vent their desires. Heath looked at the young girl with interest. At this moment, he remembered that a few days ago, the Baron had indeed mentioned to him that he would arrange someone to take care of his food and living. At that time, he did not pay much attention to it. He did not expect that this was what the Baron meant by taking care of him. He asked, "What's your name?" The young girl said, Elisa. Elisa Bane, my lord." Heath was stunned. "Bane? Baron Bane is your..." The young girl said, "My father." Heath was enlightened. Baron Bane had a total of 3 legitimate daughters. One was married to an outsider, and the other was married to Night Thor. This should be the remaining one. It was said that this was not the birth of the Baroness, but the birth of Baron Bane with a dancer lover. However, the dancer was too beautiful and would please the Baron. Baron Bane was delighted at the moment, so he acknowledged the girl as a Bane. This matter was quite big at that time. The Baroness was so angry that she even skinned the dancer lover alive. In this world, it was common for nobles to keep mistresses. However, it was a different matter to acknowledge the illegitimate child. After all, legally speaking, the illegitimate child had the right to inherit. However, at this moment, the White Wolf territory had already been divided up. The right to inherit was also dispensable. It was very suitable for the Baron to use her as a reward to rope him in. After all, she was the legitimate daughter of a noble. If it was an apprentice knight without any schemes, he would be loyal to the Baron from then on. After he sorted out his thoughts, he was no longer conflicted. Looking up, Heath sized up the girl in front of him. The fact that her mother was able to charm the White Wolf Baron was enough to prove that her appearance was impeccable, and Elisa, who had inherited his mother's genes, was also impeccable in this regard. Her skin was as white as snow, as if it could be broken with just a blow. It made people want to take a bite. Her face was oval and her facial features were small. She was born with a baby face. In addition, she was not old. She looked quite cute. In absolute contrast to her tender appearance, her figure was tall and round. She truly had a child's face. Heath could not help but ask, "How old are you?" Elisa answered, 15, my lord." It was really hard to tell. With such a proud body, even some adult women would pale in comparison. Sighing in his heart, Heath began to think. Since the Baron had sent her to be his personal maid, then this reward was something he could not change. He had to accept it or not. This kind of girl was sent to be a man's pastime to kill the boredom and practice. To put it bluntly, she was used to. She could stand here and take off her clothes, which showed that she was ready to become a woman. So the question was, did he adhere to the core socialist values? Or did he follow the customs? Chapter 9, I Accept. After some thought, Heath decided to suppress his urges for the time being. It wasn't that he was noble, it was just that he felt too young. It wasn't that the girl was too young, it was that he was too young. He was only 13 years and 6 months old, and he had just matured sexually. This was the golden age of the body. If he accepted this too early, he was afraid that it would affect the normal development of the body, and he would regret it for the rest of his life. No matter how horny he was, it would take at least 1 or 2 years for his body to mature. Anyway, since Elisa had already been given to him as his personal maid, she was his personal property. There was no need to rush this moment. Everything was still focused on development and improving his strength. With this in mind, Heath put aside his distracting thoughts. He said, "Put on your clothes." Unexpectedly, as soon as he said that, Elisa's face turned pale. She immediately knelt in front of Heath, grabbed Heath's knee, and begged with red eyes, "Please, sir, please accept Elisa. Elisa will be very obedient. No matter what you ask Elisa to do, don't chase Elisa away. Elisa will serve you with all her heart." Elisa's identity was very sensitive. It could only be said that she was just right to be given as a gift to Heath. If she was sent back, she would definitely be executed. After all, no one wanted to see someone using Elisa's name to avenge Baron Bane and fight for the right to inherit the White Wolf territory. Heath could understand this. He lifted Elisa's cheek and said, "You misunderstood. I just told you to put on your clothes. I didn't mean to chase you away." After a pause, he explained bluntly, "I'm still too young. I don't want to waste my energy on these things. Let's wait for 2 years." Elisa heaved a sigh of relief. She quickly stood up and said, "Yes. Yes." But after a pause, she could not help but feel troubled again. "Then, what can Elisa do for you, my lord?" The purpose of the personal maid coming here was to accompany him to sleep. If she did not do this, Elisa did not know what the purpose of staying here was. Washing clothes, cooking, serving tea, and passing water? These were matters that the castle servants would handle, and it was not her place to interfere. Moreover, she did not think that these tasks could be exchanged for her life. Heath's mind had returned to the book at the moment. He pointed at the bed without raising his head. "Help me warm up my bed." Half a month later, at the wedding banquet in White Wolf Castle. Things could change if they were too urgent. After confirming the strategic strategy of annexing White Wolf Castle, Baron Carter quickly began to prepare. Killing those who deserved to be killed, appeasing those who deserved to be appeased, roping in those who deserved to be roped in, and trading those who deserved to be traded. In 1 month, the exchange of interests between all parties had been completed, and Night Thor's wedding was pushed to the front. At this moment, in the wedding banquet hall, the smiling Night Thor was entertaining the guests. Beside him was his 13-year-old new wife. The two of them stood together like father and daughter, more than husband and wife. Sitting in front of a table, Heath was tasting the delicacies on the table. From time to time, people of the same age walked past him. Every time at this time, they would cast a few admiring gazes. Whispers could be heard faintly. Is this the miracle sword that defeated Andrew and killed Knight Roya? He looks even younger than the rumors. Isn't that too ridiculous? I heard that it was a sneak attack. Even if it was a sneak attack, it's still very impressive, okay? I heard that he's not even 14 years old. If the rumors are true, that would be too terrifying. With such a terrifying talent, I'm afraid he'll be able to advance to a knight before he's 16 years old. A 16-year-old knight? He looks quite handsome. I wonder if he has a lover. During the battle on the ruling plains, Heath became famous in one battle. Now, the entire river valley knew that Greystone Castle had produced a young genius apprentice knight who had taken down the head of an official knight before he was 14 years old. Listening to the discussions in his ears, Heath frowned. Isn't this a little too high profile? A tree that stood out in the forest would be destroyed by the wind. What he wanted was to get the most benefits without attracting attention. It was enough to take advantage. It did not matter whether he was in the limelight or not. But then again, this was actually a false proposition. Since ancient times, fame and wealth were not separated. Without fame, how could there be benefits? He wanted to take advantage of the situation, but he did not want people to know. How could there be such a cheap thing in this world? Forget it, if they want to flaunt it, then flaunt it. In my previous life, I was treading on thin ice, and being careful was already tiring enough. It's rare to have a second life, and I also have such a big golden finger. Can't I live a more carefree life? If there really is trouble, just solve it. After thinking through this point, Heath was no longer conflicted. He enjoyed the worship of others to the fullest. Ta ta ta. At this moment, the sound of hurried footsteps was heard. More than 10 young men of the same age as Heath walked over and surrounded the table where Heath was sitting. It was obvious that they were not friendly. A few apprentice knights sitting at the same table stood up nervously and grabbed the benches beside them. No weapons were allowed in the wedding banquet. All their weapons were confiscated before they entered the venue. A blonde-haired teenager walked out of the group of young people. He glanced at the few apprentice knights at the table and asked, "Who is Heath Noen?" Heath was stunned for a moment. He put down the half-eaten beef in his hand and stood up. "I am." The blonde-haired boy took out a handkerchief and threw it at Heath. At the same time, he said angrily, "Let's fight, you despicable guy who ambushed us on the sacred battlefield." Heath was stunned. Who was this guy? Who is that blonde boy? He looks so arrogant. Doesn't he know who he is challenging? You don't even know him? That's Beck Fergus of the Fergus family. Roya Fergus, who was killed by Heath, is his father. Hearing the discussions of the others, Heath suddenly understood. So he was taking revenge for his father. But why do I feel that this revenge is a little strange? Haven't we already reached an agreement? After the end of the war, the noble middleman had arranged a mediation, which included Knight Roya's eldest son and Heath. After the mediation of the middleman, both sides had already shaken hands and made peace, agreeing to forget about the past. Heath recalled the smile on the face of the noble young man. No matter how he looked at it, it did not seem to be fake. But what was going on now? Actually, this was because Heath didn't have enough information. Knight Roya had 2 sons, and the one in front of him was the younger one. According to the law of inheritance, he was originally ranked after his elder brother. However, his outstanding talent from a young age was deeply loved by Knight Roya. It even caused Knight Roya to have the idea of kicking out his elder brother and letting him inherit the farm. Seeing that Knight Roya's idea was getting stronger and stronger, it was only a matter of time before he changed the order of inheritance. Who would have thought that Heath would kill Knight Roya at this time? Knight Roya, who was in his prime, did not make a will. According to the inheritance law, his farm would naturally be handed over to his eldest son, and this Beck before him would not get a single cent. His elder brother greeted Heath with a smile, but his younger brother had a deep enmity with him. This was the reason. Heath opened his mouth and asked, Can we duel at other people's weddings? Although he didn't know where the strange feeling came from, it wasn't his style to find fault with someone without saying a word. After a pause, he picked up the handkerchief and threw it back. If it's okay, I'll accept it, he said straightforwardly. Chapter 10, Talent Extraction. According to the rules, as long as the master agreed, then the duel could be held. Baron Carter did not want to make it too embarrassing for others to say that he had killed everyone, but he also did not want others to laugh at Greystone Castle and say they were cowards. So after thinking for a while, he found an excuse to smile at Beck and said, "He, of course the duel can be, but son of a knight, are you ready to bet the money?" He took out a piece of parchment and wrote an IOU. "Here is 100 gold coins. If you can win this duel, you are welcome to come to Greystone Castle to exchange it with me. If you lose, you will have to pay the same amount. So, are you ready for this money?" The currency units in this world were divided into 3 types, gold, silver, and copper. 100 copper coins were equal to 1 silver coin, and 100 silver coins were equal to 1 gold coin. An ordinary family of 3 would only spend a few gold coins a year, and the total output value of a farm was only a few dozen gold coins a year. Beck, who had not even inherited the farm, naturally could not afford such a sum of money. Just as a conflict was about to be resolved, a voice rang out from the crowd. "I will pay for Knight Beck's bet." The Baron's smile froze. He turned his head and saw a silver-haired old man walking over. Baron Carter narrowed his eyes. Viscount Leicester. This was Viscount Leicester, one of the 3 great families in River Valley. He was a supporter of the Fergus family. The relationship between the two was similar to that between Baron Carter and Baron Saul. Baron Carter said with a faint smile, "Viscount Leicester, are you sure you want to get involved in this mess?" Viscount Leicester looked unwell, and his face was unnaturally black. After hearing Baron Carter's question, he coughed and answered, "Ahem, I just heard that a rare genius apprentice knight has appeared in our River Valley. I want to see if this is a true name or a false one." Baron Carter said, "You won't be disappointed." The duel began. Everyone went to the side of the banquet hall and cleared out an empty space. Heath and Beck walked into the empty space and stood still. They took the 2 cross swords that were sent by the servants. The crowd began to whisper. "Who do you think will win? It should be Miracle Sword Heath, right? He even killed a knight." "Forget it, that was a sneak attack. It can't be counted. Beck is really capable. I also bet on Beck. It's said that he is already half a foot to becoming a knight." Heath was a new genius in River Valley, but his opponent, Beck, was not weak at all. He had been famous in River Valley for a long time, and was even known as the #1 person below knights. If not for this matter, coupled with the support of Baron Roya's resources, Beck's advancement to a knight within this year would definitely be a certainty. In the end, the bride who represented the master stepped forward to give a duel speech. "I represent the White Wolf Castle." In the same way as the eldest son of Knight Roya, the bride was also the beneficiary of this incident. Therefore, although her father had died and she was going to marry a 40-year-old middle-aged man, the little girl still looked very energetic. "I, Kelly Bain, the master of White Wolf, officially announce that the duel has begun." As the bride gave the order, the battle began. Day. 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 A series of hurried footsteps sounded. Heath and Beck rushed towards each other at the first moment. Clang! The cross swords collided in the air, and a sound like a gong exploded. Like his father, Beck learned the rose sword technique. This sword technique was famous in the Rodan kingdom for its magnificence. However, Heath's moon cross sword was also famous for its magnificence. One could imagine what kind of scene the two would have when they fought. For a moment, everyone could only see streaks of sword light flashing in the air, and the 2 cross swords drew countless light shadows in the air under the dance of their respective masters. Ding! 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 The crisp sound of metal clashing rang out continuously, and large sparks were set off in the air, like small fireworks bursting out from the top of a banquet. So powerful! Is this the level of a top apprentice knight? I thought that I was only slightly inferior compared to them. The people were endlessly amazed. Such a high-intensity sword exchange lasted for nearly 100 rounds. Heath felt that it was about time, so he took advantage of Beck's breathing to expose his flaw and sent the opponent's cross sword flying. The cross-guard sword spun in the air for 2 rounds, and then with a clang, it stabbed into the floor diagonally. Has the winner been decided? Isn't it too sudden? It's a pity that Beck made a mistake. Yet, both sides haven't used their full strength yet. Everyone thought that Beck was seized by Heath because of a momentary mistake, so they couldn't help but cry out in pity. Even Beck himself thought so. And because of this, he did not admit defeat immediately after losing. Instead, he refused to admit defeat and said, "This round doesn't count. It was my mistake just now." As he said that, he was about to pick up the cross blade. Clang! The loud sound of the sword rang out. Heath raised the cross blade horizontally. The sharp blade was pointed straight at Beck's throat. If he went any further, it would pierce through his throat. Heath said coldly, "A win is a win, a loss is a loss. There is no such thing as a mistake in a duel." He did not slash him because it was the wedding today. If he still did not know what was good for him, Heath would not mind sending him to see his father. Beck's smile froze. Baron Carter clapped his hands and tried to smooth things over. He, it was a very interesting duel. Both of you are outstanding apprentice knights of our river valley. Let's call it a draw. Viscount Lester, what do you think? Viscount Lester's expression darkened. He put on a fake smile and said, "You must be joking, Sir Baron. A loss is a loss. A win is a win. I, Lester, can still afford 100 gold coins. Beck Fergus has lost." As he spoke, his gaze swept coldly over Beck. Under that cold gaze, Beck's expression suddenly changed. For a moment, he could not help but keep silent. In fact, revenge was just words. Viscount Lester was the real mastermind of today's duel, and the purpose was to knock down Baron Carter and make him lose his prestige. Beck was known as the #1 person below knights. He thought that facing a mere apprentice knight was a sure thing, but he did not expect to still lose. Not being able to inherit the farm, Lester was already Beck's last chance to make a comeback. This loss, regardless of how Lester would punish him, just his chance of advancing to a knight would become infinitely slim. Talent alone was not enough for the knight's path. He also needed nutritious food, excellent weapons and armor, and golden blood. Every step of knight training required countless resources. Without these resources, no matter how good his talent was, it would be in vain. If he could not advance to a knight, once his prime time was over, he would only be an apprentice knight for the rest of his life, and that would be it. Thinking of this, Beck's head exploded with a bang, and he felt his heart burning with anxiety. He was so angry that he immediately pulled out the cross-shaped sword on the ground and roared angrily, "It's all because of you, you damn bastard." As he said this, he stabbed the sword straight at Heath's back. Heath frowned and put one hand on the hilt of the sword by his waist. Just as he was about to cut this annoying fellow down with the sword, someone attacked before him. Clang! A loud sword chime sounded. The cross-shaped sword flashed in the air and pierced a hole in Beck's chest. The overflowing sword aura tore his heart and lungs into pieces. Beck widened his eyes and looked down at his empty chest. He opened his mouth wide. "You!" Before he could finish his sentence, he fell to the ground with a thud and was dead. The Baron sheathed his crossguard sword and said coldly, "You can't even follow the most basic rules. Even if you lose, you won't admit it and you still want to sneak an attack from behind. Such scum will only lose the face of the nobles if he lives in this world. Someone, carry him out." Heath volunteered, "Let me do it." As he said that, he walked forward. He wanted to take the opportunity to farm his attributes, and at the same time, he wanted to farm his talent. Do not think that having the system's talents was not important. On the contrary, talents were extremely important and could not be replaced. There was a saying in Blue Star that hard work to determine the lower limit and upper limit of talents was also useful here. The system's extraction function could only help Heath increase his strength to the maximum extent within his talents. As for which level he could increase to, it would depend on his talent. For example, at the Grand Knight level, with Heath's current talent, it was impossible for him to increase it. When his attributes increased to a certain level, it would be impossible for him to increase it any more. At this time, he needed talent. Heath grabbed Beck with one hand, and at the same time, he muttered in his heart, "System, extraction. Beep, extraction successful. Agility plus 0.1. Beep, extraction successful. Knight talent plus 1. Current knight talent, 6. Rating, medium. Beep, extraction successful. Wizard talent plus 1. Current wizard talent, 1. Rating, low." Heath was stunned. He could understand attributes and knight talent. This wizard talent. What the hell was that? Chapter 11, Attack. After thinking for a while, Heath could only put this aside. The wedding continued. Hee, apprentice knight Heath, can I have the honor to ask you to dance? Can you line up? I came first, apprentice knight Heath. You just promised to have a drink with me. Don't go back on your word. Apprentice knight Heath, can you accompany me to the garden? My chest feels a little stuffy. Can you help me to the room next door to rest for a while? I might be a little drunk. If there were people in the front who thought that Heath was just a lucky dog who got lucky by relying on sneak attacks, then now, his strength was beyond doubt. Talented people would be welcomed everywhere, and here was no exception. For a time, people all showed great enthusiasm for this rising genius apprentice knight in River Valley. There were countless compliments, wooing, and flattery. There were countless girls who came to flirt with him, dancing, talking, drinking, and chatting. They always pulled their collars very low, or pretended to accidentally touch Heath with sensitive parts of their bodies, and occasionally let out some strange but hot moans to arouse people's desire. There were all kinds of explicit or implicit suggestions, not to mention those who pretended to be drunk, those who felt stuffy in their chest, those who invited them to the garden for some fresh air, and those who invited them to their rooms to rest. It was not an exaggeration at all. As long as Heath was willing, he could easily make these girls strip naked, lie down on the bed, and take any position he wanted. The nobles had always been open-minded, and more importantly, it was the amazing talent and amazing potential that Heath had shown. He was only 14 years old and already had the strength of a knight. If he continued to develop like this, it was very likely that he would become a grand knight. It should be known that a knight could control a family. A grand knight was a terrifying existence that could control a country. After the wedding, Heath was arranging his saddle and preparing to return to Greystone Castle. At this time, the Baron walked over and waved at him. Heath, give your horse to Kayla. You'll ride in the carriage with me. The apprentice knights were envious. It was a great honor to ride in the carriage with the Baron. Heath put down the reins. Yes. Heath followed the Baron to the carriage. He looked around the carriage. The carriage was very wide. There were 2 soft leather sofas on the left and right sides. There was also a coffee table in the middle. A footman stood beside them. After the 2 of them got on, he took some tea from the cabinet and brewed it for them. The Baron pointed at the teacup in front of Heath and said, "Try it. It's blood crown." Heath picked up the teacup and took a sip. It was filled with red tea leaves. It was like blood, and it tasted very fishy. The Baron asked, "How does it taste?" Heath said, "Very fishy." The Baron laughed and said, "Ha ha ha, this is a tea that only the king can drink." It was said that the king of the Rodan kingdom favored blood crown. At this moment, an apprentice knight came to the side of the carriage and said, "Sir Baron, the carriage is ready." This was the second son of Knight Hall, Matthew. After Knight Hall died in the battle, his eldest son was arranged by the Baron to marry Baron Bane's wife. His second son was brought into the castle by the Baron to be his guard. The Baron nodded and said, "Let's set off." Yes. The convoy began to set off towards Greystone Castle. While drinking tea, the Baron chatted casually with Heath. He asked, "How is it? Do you like that girl?" Heath nodded and said, "Very satisfied." The Baron said earnestly, "You can play with her, but you have to pay attention to moderation. A woman will only affect the speed of drawing a sword. You have very outstanding talent as a knight. Don't lose it because of this." Heath said, "Thank you for your teachings." Seeing Heath's calm reaction, the Baron was slightly stunned. He narrowed his eyes and looked at Heath's expression. Seeing that his expression was normal, he could not help but be stunned. He asked, "You haven't touched that girl yet?" Heath explained truthfully, "I feel that my body is still developing. If I come into contact with this kind of thing too early, it will affect my growth, and it will not be good for my training." The Baron opened his mouth. Everyone knew that a woman would only affect the speed of drawing a sword. However, how many people could really restrain their desires? After a while, he laughed and said, "Ha ha ha, Heath, you will become an outstanding knight. At the very least, you will become an advanced knight." There were still a few stages between a knight and a grand knight. They were the beginner knight, intermediate knight, and advanced knight. Based on Heath's current temperament, willpower, and talent, it was not difficult for him to become an advanced knight. As for the Grand Knight, the Baron did not dare to say anything. As a knight himself, he knew that this level could not be achieved through hard work and perseverance alone. It depended on one's life. If one was destined to be able to go up, then they could go up. If they could not, then they could not. The Baron said to the servant, "Take out the things." "Yes." The servant opened the cabinet and took out 2 bags. After opening the bags, one was filled with gold coins, and the other was filled with a small black stone. The Baron explained, "This bag of gold coins was given to you by Lester, and the one beside it is my reward for you." Heath said, "Thank you very much." As he said that, he put away the 2 items with a strange expression. Not to mention the gold coins, what was this small black stone beside it? Just as he was curious, he did not expect the system's notification to ring in his ear. Beep, supernatural substance discovered. Do you wish to extract it? Heath was stunned. He said, "Extract." Beep, extraction successful. Spiritual power plus 0.1. Spiritual power? This thing increased spiritual power? Just as Heath was stunned, he felt a strange energy surge into his mind. His mind instantly became much clearer, and his thoughts seemed to be much more active than before. So that was it. Was this spiritual power? It was impossible not to be curious about this 4th attribute. During this period of time, Heath had also studied and changed many magical beasts, but he had not been able to bring any improvement to it. He did not expect to see an improvement on this inconspicuous small stone. At once, Heath could not help but look at the small stone in front of him curiously. It was about the size of a thumb, square, and grey-black. It looked very inconspicuous, no different from a small stone on the side of the road. "What is this?" At this moment, the Baron's voice sounded. The Baron said with a smile, "Don't underestimate this stone. Its value is no less than the 100 gold coins that old man Lester gave you." Heath was slightly surprised. "This thing is so valuable." The Baron continued, "Focus on your cultivation. Greystone Castle has never been stingy with the rewards for those who are capable. After you become a knight, I will officially award you a farm." Heath was even more confused. After all, a farm was not something that could be completed with just a shabby house and a few acres of land. There had to be subjects, servants, farmers, and so on. A complete farm had to have at least 1 to 200 people, not to mention other resources. However, the situation in the Rodan Kingdom was that there were more knights than there were farms. Most of the knights in most regions had no farms and could only receive allowances. The previous knight Thor was an example. Although the Baron had taken over the White Wolf territory, the White Wolf territory had long been divided up. Heath could not think of where the Baron would get a farm for him. Heath quickly said, "Yes." No matter what, he had to agree first. Of course, it was great to have a farm. He could do whatever he wanted in his territory, just like a local emperor. At this moment, the carriage stopped. "Who are you people?" "This is the carriage of the Noen family. Get out of the way." "Ah! Enemy attack! Enemy attack!" There was a sudden commotion outside the window. The sound of arrows being shot, the sound of weapons clashing, and the neighing of war horses could be heard. Heath frowned and quickly grabbed his crossguard sword. Matthew, the guard, appeared at the window in a panic. There was an arrow stuck in his bloody shoulder. He said hurriedly, "Sir. Sir Baron, we've been attacked." The Baron nodded. "Okay, I understand." He looked very calm, and there was even a faint smile on his lips. Then, he said to Heath calmly, "Let's go, Heath. We'll go down and have a look. The man who sent you the farm is here." The 2 of them got off the carriage. Although they were attacked, the apprentice knights of Greystone Castle reacted quickly. They had all gathered in the carriage and erected a few large shields in front of them. Seeing that the sneak attack had failed, the enemy did not continue to attack rashly. Instead, they walked out from the hidden bushes and surrounded the carriage. At this time, everyone was able to see the person who attacked them clearly. This sight made the apprentice knights present feel terrified. The number of people who had attacked them was more than 10 times that of them. Moreover, they were well equipped and their cross swords were gleaming with cold light. From the looks of it, they were not easy to deal with. Just who were these people? The answer was soon revealed. Baron Carter walked out and shouted to the front, "Viscount Lester, since you're here, don't you intend to show yourself?" There was a moment of silence before footsteps could be heard. Da. After a while, a figure walked out. It was Lester. Chapter 12, Conspiracy. What? It's the nobles who attacked us. It's the Lester family. How could they do this? How dare they do this? There was a commotion in the convoy. The apprentice knights were shocked, angry, and in disbelief. Heath gripped his cross-sword tightly and was ready to fight to the death to break out of the encirclement. The current situation was 100 times more dangerous than the previous war. In this land, assassinating the nobles was quite a violation of the rules. It was a big taboo. Once it was discovered by outsiders, it would be attacked by all the nobles, attacked by the kingdom, and the entire family would be uprooted. Therefore, this kind of thing could either not be done, or it could not leave any loopholes. The Baron looked at Viscount Lester and said, "Viscount, are you going to break the rules?" Lester said, "You forced me to do this." After a pause, he went straight to the point, "Carter, I have one last question for you. Are you willing to hand over the Greystone mine or not? As long as you agree, I will immediately turn around and leave. When I go back, I will immediately execute my son and have all my daughters stand out and choose a person you like to have a wedding with you. From now on, the entire Lester family will worship you as their lord. How about it?" He pleaded, "You still have a lot of time, and a lot of 10 years left. In the future, you'll be able to find even more Greystone mines. There's no need to fight with an old man like me who's on his last legs. Leave this opportunity half a year later to me, okay?" Heath was puzzled. Greystone mine? Greystone mine again? What exactly was this thing? An opportunity half a year later? What did this mean? He really could not understand what kind of mine was worth a viscount starting a war in. Now, a viscount was even willing to betray the entire family, break the rules, and push the family to the bonfire. Even in the face of such tempting conditions, Baron Carter was still unmoved. The Baron shook his head and said, "Viscount, you are mistaken. There is only one master in this land. In the past, now, and in the future." Lester's eyes turned red. He said angrily, "You forced me to do this. Kill them." Clang! Clang! Ding! 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 The cold sound of metal clashing rang out. The battle began once again. The Baron pulled out his cross-sword and walked to the front to command the battle. Lester sneered. "Carter, just give up and surrender. Do you really think you are a grand knight? With the short-term power borrowed from your knight's heart, you cannot escape." The Baron said while facing the enemy, "It seems that your excellency the Viscount is very concerned about me." Lester said, "Then you should know that since I dare to appear here, it means that victory is already within my grasp." "You have lost." Baron Carter sneered. "What if?" Lester snorted coldly. "Stubborn." The two of them did not speak any more, and the battle continued. The Baron commanded the apprentice knights to retreat to the back of the carriage, using the carriage as a cover to defend. Heath could not understand this. After all, retreating to the back of the carriage could strengthen the defense, but at the same time, it blocked the way forward and completely cut off the possibility of breaking out of the encirclement. If they did not break out of the encirclement, wouldn't it be a dead end if they continued to defend? But why did the Baron not seem to panic at all? Could it be? Suddenly, Heath seemed to have thought of a possibility. And as if to confirm this guess, at this moment, the sound of horse hooves suddenly rang out in the distance. Day! 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 Not long after, a convoy appeared not far away. Looking at the emblem on the carriage, it was one of the guests of the Ron family that night. The Ron family was only a small family, but at this moment, Lester's expression changed drastically. He hurriedly grabbed a knight and said, "Cologne, quick, no matter what method you use, go up and stop them." However, before this knight could go up, more footsteps sounded. Not long after, a fleet of carriages came from all directions. The Weiss family, the Lott family, the Furman family. They were all nobles of River Valley, and were the guests tonight. Lester's body trembled, and his face turned pale. "All of you, stop!" At this moment, a vigorous voice sounded. An old man with silver hair like Lester walked out. The coat of arms on his clothes indicated his identity. He was from the Portia clan, one of the 3 great clans of River Valley, and the one in front of him was the lord of the Portia clan, Count Portia. The battle finally stopped. The knights of the Lester family were pale and trembling. Lester's eyes were red as if he was crazy. Why are you stopping? Kill them! Kill them all! Kill them all! Count Portia said in a deep voice, Lester, you are crazy. You broke the rules. Do you want the entire Lester family to be buried with you? He is not a member of my Lester family. At this moment, a young man in his early 20s walked out. This was the son of Viscount Lester, young Lester. Young Lester bowed to Count Portia and said, Count, that is just an old lunatic who is not in his right mind. The moment he committed this serious crime, he voluntarily gave up his authority as a lord. Everything he did has nothing to do with my Lester family. After a pause, he said to the knights in front, I am now ordering you, as the acting lord of the Lester family, to stop your stupid actions immediately. Lester's eyes turned red. He pointed at young Lester and said fiercely, Boer, how dare you? I am your father. You betrayed your father. Young Lester said coldly, I am only protecting my family. After a pause, he cursed in a low voice, besides, how can someone like you who can use your son's head as a bargaining chip be called a father? Lester's body trembled. He looked at young Lester, then at Baron Carter, and finally came to his senses. Conspiracy. Carter. This is all your conspiracy. You did it on purpose. You deliberately leaked the news of the Greystone mine, and you rushed back even at night to bait me. Everything is on purpose. Everything is your conspiracy. You despicable foreigner. The ancestor of the Noen family came from a foreign land. Lester pointed at the nobles in front and cursed, and you bunch of accomplices. What benefits did Carter give you that you had to protect him like this? Everyone looked at Lester in shock, their expressions filled with one word. Crazy. Lester grabbed a knight by the collar. Why are you stopping? Kill. Kill them all. Kill them all. The knight looked at him, his eyes full of hatred. He threw away the weapon in his hand. I lost. Lester was still making a scene. The Baron frowned and turned his head to look at young Lester. Young Lester nodded, and then he looked at a corner of the crowd. A man immediately walked out of the crowd and shouted angrily, Lester! You murderer! Give me back my sister's life! As he spoke, he took out a dagger and rushed forward. Oh! God! Quick! Stop him! The crowd cried out in alarm. However, the guards seemed to be stunned and unmoved. They even seemed to be frightened and stepped aside one after another. The man successfully rushed in front of Lester and stabbed him more than 10 times with the dagger. Viscount Lester, whose body was full of holes, fell into a pool of blood just like that. Conspiracy! Conspiracy! It's all a conspiracy! He muttered to himself, his eyes wide open, and no sound came out of them. Chapter 13, Half a Year. Father! Young Lester's eyes became hot. He rushed forward and picked up Lester, who was in a pool of blood. The nobles all went forward to comfort him. Heath also took the opportunity to go forward. Of course, he was not there to comfort him, but to extract it. I wonder what can be extracted from the body of such a high-ranking noble. As he guessed in his heart, he put his unconscious hand on Viscount Lester's corpse. Extract. Ding! Extraction successful. Obtained knowledge guide to life refinement. A large amount of unfamiliar information surged into Heath's mind. This was a special knowledge that was completely different from the past. It was of different levels and different domains. When Heath finished accepting this knowledge, his eyes suddenly widened. At this moment, he suddenly understood all the questions that he had been curious about previously. He understood what the Greystone mine was. He understood what the small stone the Baron had given him was. He understood why so many nobles had risked their lives and risked their entire family for it. At this moment, his understanding of this world had changed drastically. According to the investigation, the man who had assassinated Viscount Lester was a commoner in the territory of the Lester family. Viscount Lester heard from somewhere that eating the heart of a young virgin could delay the aging process and restore youth, so he kidnapped the man's sister and killed her. On the day of the wedding, the carriage driver of the Horn family fell ill, and the man acted as the carriage driver at the last minute, so he appeared at the scene. After that, the fate of the Lester family was the same as that of the White Wolf territory, or even worse. Half of the family territory was taken back by the king, and the remaining half was divided into many different sizes. Through marriage, alliances, and other legal means, they entered the various families in River Valley. The reason why the nobles appeared at the scene that night was coincidental. Some of them had to take a detour because the road was cut off, and some of them had gotten lost, so they coincidentally became witnesses. However, everyone could choose to come or not, so these were all things that the witnesses deserved. Of course, the largest piece of the noble's territory was still inherited by the son of Viscount Leicester, who appeared that night. The younger Leicester had received knight training in Greystone Castle and was conferred the title of Baron. In short, the matter had come to an end. River Valley that had been in turmoil for a long time had finally regained its tranquility. All the nobles were doing their own things, preparing for the upcoming feast. In half a year's time, they were working hard to prepare. Time flew by, and in the blink of an eye, half a year had passed. Heath. In the training field, Heath was practicing his sword. Hoo! 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 The cold sound of the wind breaking could be heard. The cross-shaped sword was like a windmill that kept spinning in the air, drawing out streaks of light and shadows. After half an hour, the sound of the wind breaking stopped abruptly. Huff! After taking 2 deep breaths, Heath placed the cross-shaped sword on the weapon rack beside him. Elisa walked forward with a towel in her hand and said with a smile, "Sir's sword skills are getting more and more advanced." Compared to half a year ago, Elisa looked much better. She was smiling all the time. In fact, although she was a young lady in the White Wolf Castle, because of the Baroness, her life was worse than that of a servant. She was hung up, injected with needles, stripped naked in the middle of winter, and soaked in ice water. It was common for her to suffer from hunger. If it were not for the fact that she still had some value, she would not have lived until today. Even so, her future was used as a bargaining chip for her marriage. The people she chose for her marriage were either old and ugly men or psychopaths with twisted minds. Anyway, they wouldn't let her have it easy. So when she found out that her family was destroyed and she had to be sent to the person who killed her father, Elisa didn't have any resistance. She only thought that it would be good if she could survive. She did not expect that her life would unexpectedly be better after coming here. This man did not hit her or scold her. He fed her well every day. Other than helping him bathe and warm his bed, she did not have to do anything else. Although she was a servant, she lived like a lady. Heath took the towel and wiped his wet hair. Then, he used his hand to pinch Elisa's cheek and said with a casual smile, "Aren't you becoming more and more beautiful?" Elisa said happily, "My lord knows how to coax me." Heath raised his hand and patted her perky buttocks gently. "All right, quickly put in some water for me to bathe." "Yes." When he went to the bathroom, Elisa quickly put in the water. As usual, Heath took off his clothes and entered the pool to bathe, allowing Elisa to scrub his body. For the past 6 months, Elisa had been serving him in the bath. He had long gotten used to it. As he felt the soft fingertips of the young lady glide across his skin, Heath opened the system to check his stats. Stats: Strength 11.2, Agility 11.8, Vitality 10.9, Spirit 1.3. For the past half a year, he had been going to the demonized forest to hunt demonized beasts almost every day. After half a year of continuous effort, his stats had all increased significantly. He was an intermediate knight with an average of more than 8 points in his 3 measurements, and an advanced knight had an average of more than 12 points in their 3 measurements. His attributes were not far from that of an advanced knight. There were only a few advanced knights at the age of 14 in the entire Ike continent, not to mention the Rodan kingdom. If word got out, it would definitely cause a sensation. Unfortunately, it seemed to have come to an end. His current talent should be able to reach the upper limit of a high-level knight. Recently, he had clearly felt that the attributes that a demonized beast could extract had decreased significantly. If he wanted to continue improving, he would either increase his talent or increase his resources to find higher-level demonized beasts. There was no need to think about the former. Not only would he get into trouble, Heath would not be so crazy. But where could he find a higher-level demonized beast? Thinking of this, Heath could not help but frown. Elisa quickly noticed the worry on Heath's face. She quickly asked, "My lord, did Elisa not serve you well?" The girl was currently soaking in the water to help Heath wash his body. Her wet skirt stuck tightly to her body, and her curvaceous curves were very eye-catching. Heath shook off the messy thoughts in his mind. "Forget it, I'll take it one step at a time." Thinking of this, his brows relaxed. "Let me see if you've grown up a little more recently." As he said this, he pulled Elisa into the water, and got up. Although Heath had been guarding his bottom line for the past 6 months because his body was still developing, other than that, There was nothing less. On a whim, he would ask the tailor to make some strange dresses for Elisa to change into and then ask her to. This was the problem he had when he was playing with dolls. This had little to do with respect. This was how the times were. People here could not understand the worldview of the 21st century at all. For example, when Heath played with Elisa like this, she would feel happy that she was valued and cared about by her master. If Heath treated her with respect, she would only be afraid and terrified. If it was to change the current situation, it would require the advancement of the entire civilization. It would require the experience of countless wars and the sacrifice of countless lives. Only then would it be possible. The difficulty factor was too great. It was far beyond the scope of Heath's abilities. He was not that great. In short, there was nothing to be conflicted about. After half a year of baptism, Heath had calmly accepted the social customs here and was at ease with it. Of course, he would not do anything that would cause physical injury. For example, some nobles liked Beauty and the Beast. Sir, you're so bad. You're messing with me again. In the water. After a while, the two of them came out of the water. After changing their clothes, they came out of the bathroom. Butler Star was already waiting at the door. More than half a month ago, Heath had successfully advanced to become a knight, and Baron Carter had followed his previous promise and bestowed a farm to Heath. It included more than 200 people, including the subjects, butlers, servants, and gardeners. Seeing Heath come out, the butler, Star, bowed and said, "Lord Heath, Miss Elisa." There was only Elisa by Heath's side, so everyone in the farm naturally treated her as the mistress of the farm. Heath asked, "What's the matter, Mr. Star?" Star said, "Knight Kayla has arrived. He's waiting for you in the reception room downstairs." Kayla was from the Portia family. He was the nephew of Count Portia, and his mother was the first daughter of Count Portia. Because of this, after splitting up the Lester family half a year ago, Kayla was arranged to hold a wedding with the wife of a knight who passed away during the turmoil of the Lester family. Then, he inherited the other party's farm and moved out of Greystone Castle. Kayla's farm was relatively close to Heath's farm, so he would visit from time to time. Heath nodded. "Okay, I got it. Get someone to prepare some tea and snacks." "Yes." Chapter 14, Wizard. The reception room was not big. When Heath came here, he immediately saw Kayla. At this time, he was sitting on the sofa. A young and beautiful girl was sitting on his lap. Half of her dress had been taken off, and most of her snow-white body was exposed. She let Kayla play with her, and her red cheeks were panting emotionally. No matter how one looked at this sexy scene, it looked like a couple in love who could not control themselves. But seriously, this girl was actually Kayla's daughter. Well, at least in name, she was his daughter. She was the orphan left behind by that knight. Well, one had to admit that this world was really too chaotic. He thought so too. He coughed. Cough. "I hope I'm not disturbing you too." The two of them who were in heat on the sofa finally stopped. Kayla laughed and said, "Nonsense, no, my daughter has 2 lumps on her chest and she's not feeling well. I was taking a look at her." The young girl put on her dress as if nothing had happened. At the same time, she secretly pinched Kayla. "Father, since you have a guest to see, I'll go out first." Kayla nodded. "All right, you can go out and play." The girl stood up and bowed to Heath, then left. Heath looked at Kayla with a strange expression. Although he knew that the two were not really father and daughter, at least in name, the girl called him that. He was really curious. When the girl called him father, didn't he feel uncomfortable in his heart? Probably sensing the strange look in Heath's eyes, Kayla frowned and said, "Hey, brother, can you not look at me like that? It makes me feel like a pervert." Heath walked over and sat down beside him. He said matter-of-factly, "Aren't you?" Kayla was speechless. "You? How do I explain this? Rosa and I have known each other for a long time, and when we met, we never thought that I would marry her mother, okay? That's the rule. I have to marry her mother to inherit the farm. What can I do?" Heath rolled his eyes and said sarcastically, "Then should I praise your love? Don't think that I don't know that before this, you and that girl were just acquaintances and not lovers." Pausing for a moment, he said disdainfully, "Besides, did nothing happen between you and your new wife? The girl's mother was a famous beauty in River Valley, and she was not even 30 years old. Kayla's face turned slightly red. It was obvious that Heath had hit the nail on the head. He quickly coughed and changed the topic. Ahem, let's not talk about this anymore. I came to look for you today for an important matter. Pausing for a moment, he suddenly said, do you know? The boat is here. Heath's body trembled. Really? Every 10 years, a ship would sail from overseas. On the ship was a group of special guests. They were called wizards. Yes, as his understanding of this world deepened, Heath realized that the stories and the legends were true. They could summon wind and rain, turn stone into gold, and even eternal youth. This world really had magic, and this world really had wizards. Heath asked excitedly, are the wizards here too? Kayla nodded. Of course. Prepare the magic stones. The magic stone was the small black stone that Baron Carter had given him. It was extracted from the grey stone mine. The wizards seemed to need this kind of ore very much. It was said that it was the currency of the wizards. Every 10 years, the wizards' ships would stop briefly in the Ike continent. During this period, anyone who had magic stones could go and make a wish for everything they wanted: money, power, women, even power, and even life. As long as they could afford enough magic stones, any wizard would be satisfied. Kayla said excitedly, hee, I heard that wizards have elixirs and tools that can keep people alive forever. Even if you work for a whole day, you won't be tired. No matter how many women come, you can make their legs go weak. The Baron gave each apprentice knight a magic stone, and they could do whatever they wanted with it. After a pause, Kayla asked, what about you? Brother Heath, what are you going to do with that magic stone of yours? Heath said casually, I haven't thought about it yet. Actually, he had to. Kayla suggested, why don't you use it to buy the first knight of the Scarlet Princess in the Kingdom of Ounce? It is said that her beauty has shocked the entire continent. Heath was speechless. Can't you be a little more normal in your mind? Kayla twitched his mouth. Tisk. You're the one who's abnormal. You only know how to cultivate all day long. You even push women away when they come close to you. If I were you, I would have already slept with all the women in River Valley. No, in the entire Rodan Kingdom. What's the point of living if you don't sleep with 2 more women in your life? Heath picked up the teacup and gently shook the tea in it. He looked at the ripples and his lips curved into a smile. He said meaningfully, interesting. Of course it's interesting. Half a month later, the biggest port on the east coast of the Ike continent, Whitewater Port. Goat Milk Manor. It was said that the ancestor of the manor was only a shepherd. Because he was kind-hearted, he gave a traveler a cup of hot goat milk. Then, the traveler gave the shepherd the manor. The manor was not strong, but no one dared to mess with it in the entire Ike continent. Because the traveler who built the manor was none other than a wizard who could call the wind and summon the rain. At this moment, in the Goat Milk Manor, rows of luxurious carriages were parked outside the manor. Guests who had carefully prepared gifts entered the manor in an endless stream. It was crowded and bustling. The wishing day that came once every 10 years had arrived. Everyone hoped to use magic to realize their wishes. Take your number plate and look at the number on it. Wait in the hall for the summoning. If you don't agree immediately when the number is called, you will have to rearrange the order. Do you understand? The manor attendant handed a wooden plate with a number on it to Heath. Heath agreed and left with the wooden plate. At this moment, Kayla ran over. Hey, Heath, what's your number? Heath raised the plate and waved it. 108. Kayla said, I'm 107 and I'm in front of you. Let's go wait in the hall and see what the others want. Okay. The two of them then walked into the hall. The spacious hall was crowded at this moment. People from various countries were crowding here, both nobles and civilians. Everyone's eyes were gathered in front of them, looking excited. There was a low table against the wall, and an old man sat in front of the table. Heath sized up this wizard. He had a long goatee and grey hair. He held a pipe in one hand and wore a grey cloak. His image unexpectedly matched the wizard in a movie in Heath's memory. When the two entered, they met a mortal who had made a wish. It was a man dressed in shabby clothes. His fingernails were full of dirt, and his entire body was emitting a sour smell. The people around could not help but pinch their noses. However, the wizard did not mind. He smiled amiably and said, Sir, do you want any help? The man took out a dirty small cloth bag. After opening the bag, 8 magic stones were scattered inside. He respectfully placed the magic stones on the low table, and then bent his knees in front of the low table. His whole body trembled as he said, I hope to become a noble. A noble was the food eater of this world. As long as one was a noble, they would be able to live comfortably without having to worry about their livelihood. However, the social status was destined. It was impossible for a commoner to become a noble. However, at this moment, the wizard just nodded with a smile and said as if nothing had happened. Okay, I promise you. Then, he took out a glass bottle and said to everyone, the potion in this bottle can make people immune to all diseases. If you drink it, you won't be afraid of the plague. Before he finished speaking, a middle-aged man stood out. The man pointed at the poor man on the ground and said, I am the Duke of Ankara. I promise in the name of the Ankara family that I will make this man a lord if he promises to be loyal to the Ankara family for generations. The wizard nodded, and the Duke of Ankara went forward and took the bottle of potion. The poor man on the ground was so excited that he could not help but blush. He said crazily, I am a noble. I am a noble. I am a noble. Thank you, wizard, thank you, wizard. The wizard said with a smile, you're welcome. After saying that, he suddenly picked up his pipe and knocked on the corner of the table. Immediately. Splash! Suddenly, a water ball appeared in the air. The water ball flew to the man's body and swam around, sucking away the dirt on the man's body. The wizard then took a puff of smoke and gently exhaled smoke at the man. The smoke surrounded the man and seemed to turn into silk threads. The clothes on the man's body actually began to knit automatically, and the ragged clothes turned into a long shirt with buttons. In the blink of an eye, the stinky poor man disappeared and was replaced by a well-dressed gentleman. The crowd exclaimed. Magic! It's magic! Oh my god! At this moment, Heath was also very excited. He was sandwiched in the crowd and stared at the front with his eyes wide open. It was really. There was really magic. Chapter 15, Make a Wish. Next, number 26. The man happily went down. The next person who walked up was a short, ugly, and wretched-looking fatty. The fatty took out a magic stone and said without any shame, Hee, I want a woman. She must be obedient, beautiful, and never betray me. Is that okay? Everyone looked at him with disdain. Disgusting. The wizard nodded with a smile. Of course. Then he turned around. Behind him, there was a young man and a young woman standing on both sides. He said something to the young man, and the young woman walked into the corridor. After a while, the young man returned, and there was a row of young women next to him. Each of them was young and beautiful. The wizard said, you choose one. The little fatty rubbed his hands with a wretched look on his face, and quickly chose the one with big breasts. The wizard pointed at the girl and said, from now on, he is your master. The girl nodded. Yes. Then she walked over and intimately held the fatty's arm. The fatty's expression rippled, and he immediately reached out and touched the girl's body. The crowd once again cast a look of disdain. Heath, on the other hand, frowned. For some reason, this girl gave him a strange feeling. Her expression was numb, and her eyes did not have the luster that a normal person should have. She did not even have the slightest reaction when Fatty touched her in public. She was more like a toy than a person. The fatty went down. A young girl came up next. The girl took out 3 magic stones from a small cloth bag shaped like a heart and handed them over. Then she said shyly, Wizard, I want to be with the person I like forever, and he will only love me forever. It seemed that she had the same wish as the fat man, but this time the wizard shook his head and said, love is not cheap. 3 magic stones can only buy you a month at most, and after that, the other party may hate you. Do you still want to buy it? The girl was very disappointed. Only a month. But after hesitating for a while, she still nodded. I will definitely be able to touch him during this month. The wizard did not comment. As you wish. Then he took out a small bottle. Find something that smells like a man. Hair, nails, and blood are all fine. Mix it with this bottle of magic potion and drink it. From now on, wherever you appear, he will not be able to look away. The girl happily took the potion and went down. The crowd had a pained look on their faces. Stupid woman, what a waste. The guests continuously walked forward and took out magic stones to make their wishes. There were people who wished for wealth, people who wished for the right to make wishes, people who wished for the power to make wishes. There were even people who hired murderers to kill and people who wished for time. As long as they could afford the price, they would be satisfied without exception. Among them, the most expensive wish was time. It was almost 1 magic stone a day, and it had to be split among the people. Of course, the effect was outstanding. Everyone saw an old man who couldn't even stand properly turn black after drinking a bottle of magic potion. His white hair turned black, and his wrinkles disappeared. In an instant, he turned into a young man with a heroic appearance. Youth. Return to youth. It's really, immortality. Wizards can really live forever. This magical scene shocked everyone present. Everyone was envious. Heath widened his eyes and felt a sweetness in his throat. It was really immortality. The wishes continued. Soon, it was Kayla, who was in front of Heath. Kayla walked forward and took out a total of 3 magic stones. It was obvious that he hadn't told Heath the truth. However, he did not lie when it came to wishes. As he had said before, he first exchanged for items that could increase his vitality. The onlookers were all disdainful. The old wizard smiled and said, "In fact, at your age, you don't need these, but if you insist, it's not impossible." As he spoke, he took out a bottle of magic medicine. Inside it was some pellet-shaped pills. You can only eat 1 a month at most. It can guarantee that you will be energetic for the whole month. After a pause, he returned 1 magic stone. This is only worth 2 magic stones. Do you have anything else you want to exchange for the remaining 1? Kayla smiled wretchedly. I heard that the Crimson Princess of the Kingdom of Ounce is a peerless beauty. The old wizard laughed loudly. Ha ha ha, I'm afraid you'll need to talk to her face to face. As he spoke, he turned his head and said to the girl standing behind him, Karina, someone likes you. Kayla was stunned. The girl was wearing a mask, so her face couldn't be seen clearly. However, 2 fierce gazes shot out from under the mask at this moment. The crowd burst into laughter. Idiot, don't you know that Her Highness the Crimson Princess has detected a wizard's talent? You even dare to have an idea about a wizard. How dare you? Kayla's face was burning, and he quickly said awkwardly, that. I'm joking, I'm joking. The old wizard said, change your wish. This wish is too expensive. 1 magic stone can't buy it. If you haven't thought it through, you can go to the side and think about it. Okay. Okay, Kayla quickly lowered her head and walked away. Next, number 108. The attendant next to her quickly reported the number. Finally, it was Heath's turn. This is the miracle sword from River Valley? I heard that he's only 14 years old but has already advanced to a knight. A knight at the age of 14. It's unbelievable. What would such a genius exchange for? What else does he need? It must be in terms of strength. With the help of wizards, it's not impossible for him to become a grand knight. With the strength of a grand knight, there's nothing that can't be obtained. The moment Heath appeared, the crowd started discussing. A 14-year-old official knight could be counted on one's fingers in the entire Ike continent. Once the news of Heath's advancement was announced, it quickly spread to all the countries. At this moment, he was already a famous genius. Everyone's gaze focused on him. They were curious about what such a genius would ask for from a wizard. Power? Wealth? Women? Power? Under everyone's gaze, Heath walked up to the wizard and bowed respectfully. The old wizard took a puff of his cigarette and smiled amiably. There's no need to be formal. Just put the magic stones on the table. Heath quickly took out 2 magic stones and handed them over. The old wizard said, all right, tell me your wish. Heath nodded and gave his answer loudly. He said, I want to become a wizard. Yes, as a visitor from another world, how could he resist the temptation of extraordinary power? When he knew that there were real magic and real wizards in this world, Heath had already decided what he wanted. There was nothing else but the path to becoming a wizard. The crowd frowned. Too greedy. As a mortal, is it really good to have such wishful thinking? There isn't even the slightest anomaly. How can there be talent? The old wizard took a puff of his cigarette and advised, change to something else. Don't waste magic stones for nothing. Everyone knew how powerful a wizard was, but until now, no one had raised the same wish as Heath. Was this because they were stupid? They were not stupid. They just knew that this wish was not realistic. To become a wizard, one must have the talent to become a wizard. That is, the soul could resonate with the elements. This was an innate ability. If one was born with it, then he was born with it. If one was not, then he was not. This elemental constitution was extremely rare. It might not even be 1 in 100,000 people. In the past, there were countless mortals who had the same wish as Heath, but without exception, they all fell on the talent barrier and wasted precious magic stones. Because of this, other than a few people who were born with obvious characteristics, no one would waste magic stones on such an impossible thing. Baron Carter frowned and advised, Heath, not everything in the world can be done with hard work, and it's the same for wizards. Don't waste your energy and effort on this. Yeah, choose something else, Heath. Don't waste magic stones for nothing. The people around also began to persuade him. However, Heath was like a gambler whose eyes were red. He still insisted, I still want to try. Everyone frowned. They all had the same thought, reckless. The old wizard still smiled amiably and said, if you still insist, then of course you can. But the test for talent costs 3 magic stones. You're still missing 1. Heath frowned. This was something he had not expected. If it really doesn't work, then I can only exchange for a ticket to the wizard continent. I'll think of a way when I get there. Previously, someone had made a wish to follow the wizard's ship to the continent across the sea. The price of the ticket was exactly 2 magic stones. Just as Heath was thinking about this, a voice suddenly sounded. I'll help him pay for the remaining magic stone. Kayla walked out and took out the remaining magic stone. He asked, Sir Wizard, I'll help him pay for the remaining magic stone. Is that okay? The old wizard smiled and said, of course. Heath was slightly stunned. He did not expect Kayla to lend a helping hand and generously give away the precious magic stone. Kayla shrugged. Don't look at me like that. Anyway, I've already exchanged for what I want. I can't think of any other uses for this piece now. I'll just use it to bet with you. If I win, I'll be rich. Haha. A wizard friend. I am a little excited just thinking about it. Heath grinned. This is the best decision you've ever made in your life. Haha, is that so? Kayla walked down. The old wizard took out a crystal ball with a base from under the table. There was a groove on the base. The wizard first picked up a magic stone and placed it in the groove. Then he said calmly, put your hand on the crystal ball. Don't think about anything. Heath did as he was told and placed one hand on the crystal ball. The old wizard chanted a short spell. The magic stone on the base melted quickly like a black candle thrown into a bonfire. The crowd's eyes were all focused on it. They looked at it mockingly. 1 second. 2 seconds. 3 seconds. Suddenly, a colorful mist rose from the crystal ball. At the same time, the surface of the crystal ball was covered with a layer of light. The most up-to-date novels are published on Feeble. The old wizard was stunned. He said in astonishment, it really detected the elemental constitution. The crowd was stunned. The next second, the whole place was in an uproar. Chapter 16, Farewell. No way? Really? How is this possible? Could there be a mistake? Wizard talent? How could he detect wizard talent? The crowd was in an uproar. Everyone couldn't understand. There was a 1 in 100,000 chance. There weren't that many people in a country. How could someone be so lucky? Only Heath knew that this was not luck at all. He knew the answer from the beginning. This was the main reason why he dared to keep testing. The old wizard checked the crystal ball. This was the first time he had seen such a situation. However, after looking around, he did not find anything wrong with the crystal ball. He could not help but confirm, although it is hard to believe, you really tested out the elemental constitution, child. After getting the confirmation from the old wizard, the crowd was completely excited. It's really the talent of a wizard. It really detected the talent of a wizard. Wizard. Wizard, he's going to become a wizard. Everyone's eyes were focused on Heath. There was envy, jealousy, and even more visible passion. A wizard, this was an omnipotent wizard. Although wizards could not interfere with the secular world because of the rules, the benefits of befriending a wizard were still unimaginable. For a moment, the men began to rack their brains. The women quietly pulled down their collars, and everyone's heart beat faster. The conversation at the table was not over yet. The old wizard continued, according to the rules, you can choose to go to the continent across the sea with me, to the wizard world, or you can choose to stay. Think about it and give me an answer. After a pause, the old wizard added with a complicated expression, I hope you will think carefully before making a decision. Although you have talent, your talent is very weak. If you go on the path of a wizard, it is very likely that you will have a hard time. You may even put in countless efforts, but in the end, you will not get the reward that you deserve. He asked, I heard that you are already a knight, right? Heath nodded, yes. The old wizard advised, believe me, if you stay and persist on your knight path, it will definitely be more suitable for you than the wizard path, and your life will be much more fulfilling. Alright, go back and think about it. Think about it carefully before giving me an answer. Heath shook his head, no need, I want to become a wizard. If not for the system, he might have chosen carefully. But with the system, talent was not a problem for him. The old wizard sighed. Why? Everyone always thinks that becoming a wizard will give them more time. Little do they know that the time of a wizard is actually spent chasing after time. The time they truly enjoyed is even worse than that of ordinary people. Immortality is not that easy. After a sentimental sigh, the old wizard nodded and said, I respect your decision. I will stay here for 7 days. Come back to the manor in 7 days. I will take you to the wizard world. After a pause, he continued, if you have any wishes that you want to settle before this, do it as soon as possible. Say goodbye to yourself as a mortal. Heath replied, yes. The wishes continued until the end. After the wizard left, Heath became the main character in the hall. Knight Heath, I am Count Arnold of Blue Swamp Castle. I would like to have a word with you. Knight Heath, I am Princess Anna of the Aussie Dukedom. Princess Crimson is my sister. I would like to have the honor of inviting you to dinner. Knight Heath. The high and mighty prince, the noble, and the extraordinarily beautiful princess surrounded Heath, lowering their status and reserve, all for the sake of having a chance to interact with him. The enthusiasm was so intense that Heath could not breathe. Just when Heath felt like he was about to suffocate, Baron Carter walked up and pushed the crowd aside. I understand everyone's enthusiasm, but my knight still has official business to attend to. I hope everyone can understand. After saying that, he did not care about how the others reacted. He pulled him out of the crowd and left the manor under the protection of a group of apprentice knights. He returned all the way to a mansion of the Noen family in Whitewater Harbor. The Baron looked at Heath in surprise. Heath, you really surprised me. Heath said, I'm as surprised as you are. The Baron smiled. Good luck follows you, but I still have to say that you have set a bad example for everyone. Many people have wasted the magic stones in their hands. They could have exchanged for more suitable ones. Seeing that Heath had detected a wizard's talent, many people were eager to try. After him, many people went up to gamble, but all of them failed in the end. Heath shrugged and did not say anything. He could not control the greed of others. The Baron did not continue this topic. He took out a cloth bag and handed it to Heath. This is a gift for you. Congratulations, future wizard. Heath took the bag and looked at it. His expression could not help but change. It was full of magic stones. The Baron said in a caring and friendly tone, here are 100 magic stones. It's more convenient for you to take some magic stones alone. To be honest, although he knew that the Baron was just trying to win over people's hearts, Heath was still very grateful at this time. It should be known that a grey stone mine could only produce a total of 1 to 2,000 magic stones. It was already generous of the Baron to give him 100 magic stones. Heath said gratefully, thank you, Baron. The Baron shook his head and continued in a friendly manner, you don't have to thank me. No matter where we go in the future, always remember that Greystone Castle is your home. You can come back whenever you want. Heath nodded. Yes. The Baron glanced at the apprentice knights who were waiting not far away. He turned around and said, well, go and say goodbye to your friends. Have a good time this week. The castle will bear the expenses. Yes. The Baron left. The apprentice knights immediately surrounded him. Hey, Heath, are you the illegitimate child of the goddess of luck? Sir Wizard, can I kiss your toes? I suck. I suck. I suck as hard as I can. Everyone booked an entire tavern under the name of Heath's farewell party and called a large group of girls from several brothels in the city. With the Baron's golden words, everyone was generous. Heath originally did not intend to go, but he could not resist everyone's enthusiasm. In the end, he chose to go. No matter what, he had been with them for nearly a year. Eating, sleeping, and training together, they were more or less friends. At the banquet, everyone ate wantonly, drank wantonly. Of course, there was no lack of wantonly fun. Tasting women, riding horses, fighting, picking mushrooms, there were countless types of things. Heath had never seen anything like it. It gave him a taste of the open customs of the Middle Ages. After the banquet was over, the apprentice knights took their girls back to their rooms. Kayla and Heath also walked to their rooms. Kayla was drunk at the party. He was already staggering. His wife and daughter supported him on his left and right. Even so, the drunkard who was full of women still shouted, "Rosa, call your mother over. Tonight, the three of us will sleep together. It will be the same from now on. There is no need to hide the fact that we slept together. She has to accept it whether she wants to or not." The two women's faces turned green. Although their relationship was indeed like that, it was not something honorable. There was no reason for them to open their mouths and talk about it everywhere. Moreover, the mother and daughter had been deliberately concealing this topic. They usually pretended to be completely unaware of it. Now that this bastard had exposed it, the problem was how to get along with each other in the future. Kayla's wife, Nasta, quickly said to her daughter next to her, "Rosa, quickly help your father back to his room to rest." Rosa didn't dare to look at Nasta's eyes, and said with a flustered expression, "Oh. Yes. Yes, mother." The girl helped Kayla and left. The beautiful young woman who stayed behind awkwardly explained to Heath, "Ahem. Wizard, my husband likes to talk nonsense when he's drunk. Sorry to have embarrassed you." What could Heath say? Of course, he pretended not to hear it clearly. "Ah? Did he say anything just now? Sorry, I didn't pay attention." The beautiful woman looked at Heath gratefully. "Then I won't disturb you to rest, wizard. My husband is still waiting for me to take care of him." "Well, go quickly. I need to rest too." Nasta bowed and turned to leave. Heath immediately returned to his room. Elisa was tidying up the house in the room. When a knight from a farm went out, he could not go out with a horse and a sword like an apprentice knight. He had to bring his squires, attendants, servants, and so on. So, Heath brought Elisa with him on this trip. Seeing Heath come in drunk, Elisa quickly went forward and said, "My lord, I'll get you some water." Heath raised his hand and waved. "I won't wash today." He had also drunk a lot on the wine table, so he was too lazy to go and mess around. After saying that, Heath kicked off his shoes and socks roughly and fell on the big bed next to him. In a daze, he suddenly felt a pair of hands moving around his body and taking off his clothes. He knew that Elisa was helping him tidy up, so he did not pay attention to her. However, as he was tidying up, he suddenly felt that something was not right. Heath hurriedly opened his eyes. Under the blanket, Elisa was buried in her work. Chapter 17, The Journey. Heath was stunned and half sobered up. "What are you doing, Elisa?" Although the two of them no longer had any secrets about each other's bodies, it was the first time they were so intimate because Heath deliberately restrained himself. Elisa raised her head and wiped the saliva from the corner of her mouth with her thumb. Under the flickering candlelight, Heath saw that her eyes were a little red. It was obvious that she had cried before. Elisa said sadly, "My lord, you are going to the wizard world soon. I don't know when you will come back. Before that, let Elisa serve you." Heath smiled faintly and said, "There is no need for that, Elisa. I will arrange for someone to take care of you before I leave. No one will hurt you if you stay at the farm." He knew that Elisa was mainly worried about being bullied after he left. In fact, he was right. But he could not understand the fear and worry in a desperate situation. After hearing Heath's comforting words, Elisa's mood did not improve. Instead, she insisted, "Sir, if Elisa is of no value at all, then you should kill Elisa. At least, Elisa is willing to die at your hands." Heath said so, but how could Elisa believe that he would keep his promise and really protect her safety? And why would he do that? Compared to verbal promises, Elisa would believe in more practical things. At least with this layer of relationship, she felt that she belonged to this man's personal belongings. No one would allow others to destroy their own things, right? Heath was still not serious. He said jokingly, "Not to the extent of But halfway through his words, his voice suddenly stopped. This was because when he saw the young girl's eyes, there was only fear in them. Elisa said, even if Sir has really arranged everything for Elisa, how can Elisa accept all of this with peace of mind? Before you leave, let Elisa do something for you. Heath was stunned and hesitated for a moment. Elisa immediately noticed that Heath was relaxed. She did not hesitate anymore, lifted her skirt, twisted her waist, and sat down. A week passed in the blink of an eye. Heath boarded the sailboat as he wished and embarked on the journey to the Wizard continent. The sailboat they were on was called the Voyager. It was a three-masted sailboat with a length of nearly 100 meters. There were more than 60 people along with the crew. The Voyager, deck. The dining hall is on the second floor. Food is available all day. The bedrooms are on the first floor. The empty rooms can be stayed in. The voyage is for 3 months. During this period, I have to meditate. Don't disturb me. If there's anything, look for the sailors. Wizard Salado gave a brief explanation to Heath and the others and quickly left. After the wizard left, the youth who came with the wizard said, "Does anyone want to go to the dining hall together?" Hehe, legend has it that wizards often hunt legendary creatures in the sea. Maybe there will be merman meat. This was Ender, from the kingdom of Tanley in the southern part of the Ike continent. He was the same age as Heath. When Ender was very young, he had already displayed his extraordinary abilities, such as being able to talk to animals, and the spoons in his house would stand up for no reason. At first, everyone thought that it was an evil spirit that wanted to burn him to death. However, the local lord was keenly aware of a certain possibility, so he bought him from his parents and brought him back to the castle to be adopted as a son. After the arrival of the wizard this time, the lord sent Ender to be tested, and as expected, the wizard talent was tested. Karina, who was next to him, snorted lightly. Her eyes under the mask did not even look at Ender as she said arrogantly, "What status do you have? Do you think you are worthy to eat with me?" After saying that, she turned around and left. Ender's face stiffened for a moment, and he cursed in a low voice, "What the hell, do you really think you are pure-blooded just because you have a wizard wild father? You arrogant bastard!" Karina's talent mainly came from her father, who was a wizard. 15 years ago, when that wizard passed by the Ike continent, he was warmly treated by the royal family of the Kingdom of Ounce. He carefully selected several beautiful princesses to sleep with. One of them successfully got pregnant, which was Karina's mother. The descendants of wizards had a high chance of inheriting the wizard's talent, and people who obtained their talent through bloodline were also called purebloods. After cursing for a while, Ender said to Heath, "Let's go, brother Heath. If she doesn't go, we'll go together." The two of them went to the restaurant and ordered a lot of food. Of course, there was no mermaid meat, but there were a lot of strange ingredients, such as a silverfish with a shriveled old face, a shell that was soft like a woman, a devil fruit that was like a ball of yarn, and so on. According to the chef's introduction, these were all ingredients from the wizard world, which were not available in the Ike continent. While tasting the delicious food, Heath also had a pleasant harvest. Beep, extraction successful. Agility plus 0.02. Beep, extraction successful. Strength plus 0.01. Beep, extraction successful. Spirit plus 0.01. Heath thought to himself, as expected. If it's a new material, it's very easy to extract its attributes. The extraction system basically could not repeatedly extract the same material with the same composition. For example, the magic stones given by the Baron would be ineffective after being extracted once, and the same was true for the demonized beasts in the forest. Although the demonized beasts of the same species could be extracted many times due to differences in individual aspects, as the number of times extracted increased, the number of attributes that could be extracted became less and less. For example, Heath had killed 2 copper-skinned giant bears that could give him a 0.3 attribute bonus earlier, but one of them only gave him 0.1 strength, and the other one only gave him 0.03 strength. During this period of time, the growth of Heath's strength suddenly slowed down. In addition to his talent, another main reason was that the number of species that could be found in the forest decreased. Going to the wizard world is really the right choice, Heath said silently. Ender put a piece of cut beef into his mouth and said while chewing, "Brother Heath, what do you think of the wizard world?" Heath shook his head, "I'm not too sure." Ender was stunned, and then laughed. "Haha, I forgot that you were not prepared before this. Do you need me to introduce you? I have been preparing for this all these years. If that's the case, then the Noen family will be very grateful to you, sir, said Heath. In fact, he had been searching for information about the wizard world for the past 6 months, but most of the information he had found were only legends. There was very little information that was really useful, so he still knew nothing about the wizard world until now. You don't have to do that. We're all companions, aren't we? After a pause, he began to introduce the wizard world. So where should we start? Let's start with the world. The world we're in is called the wizard world. The place we're going to is. Heath got more knowledge about this world from Ender. This was something he didn't have in the previous documents, and his understanding of this world was further deepened. The name of this world was the Wizard World. As Heath had guessed before, the Ike continent was only a small island in this world, and it was a very small marginal island. From Ender's description, this world was much bigger than Earth. There were many continents in this world, and now they were going to one of them called the Old Land. This world was ruled by wizards, and wizards were the true rulers of this world. Knights ruled the family. Grand Knights ruled the country. And wizards ruled the whole world. The voyage was smooth. 3 months later, Heath arrived at the Old Land successfully. The wizard's path that he yearned for had officially begun. Chapter 18, Shadow Tower. The Underdark Tresia was a small wizard resource area on the west coast of the Old Land. It had a total area of over 100,000 square miles, which was about half the size of Blue Star. There were countless wizard organizations of all sizes in the Underdark Tresia, and among them, the largest one was undoubtedly the Shadow Tower. It was located in the area where the elements in the Underdark Tresia were the densest, and the entire Underdark Tresia was under their control. At this moment, at the entrance of the Shadow Tower, walking on the sheep farm path filled with thick withered leaves, Heath turned his head to look at the surrounding scenery. The crisscrossed trees blotted out the sky and covered the sun. The grass that grew crazily above his knees was stacked on top of each other. The light was very dim. Only a few rays of sunlight could penetrate the thick leaves and shine down, interweaving into a few beams of light in the air. It was oppressive, depressing, and gave people a feeling of suffocation. After walking like this for more than half an hour, the road ahead suddenly opened up, and the group came to an empty valley. It was still a very dark and depressing valley. A thick layer of dark clouds floated above the valley, covering up the sky that had finally appeared. In the center of the valley stood a tower that was dozens of meters tall, built with large black bricks. Looking at the dark clouds above his head, Heath suddenly felt that it looked familiar. It was very similar to the dark clouds above the demonized forest. Ender, who was beside him, probably saw his confusion, and said, "It looks familiar, right?" Heath nodded and said, "There is a dark cloud in my hometown that looks similar to this." Ender said, "The demonized forest in the Rodan Kingdom, right?" "You guessed it right. This is the enchanted dark cloud. In fact, it is a kind of enchanted life. It is gentle and obedient. It can stay in a place without moving for a very long time. It is very easy to manage, and it also has good combat ability. That's why wizards like to raise one in their wizard tower. It's said that a wizard once lived in your demonized forest. That enchanted dark cloud was raised by that wizard. Ender had been raised as a wizard since he was young. For this reason, his foster father had collected countless information about the wizard world. Therefore, his understanding of the wizard world was far greater than that of ordinary people. Heath suddenly understood. Oh! A young man in his 20s was sitting on the grass at the entrance of the valley. His eyes were closed as if he was taking a nap. When the group approached, he immediately opened his eyes like a vigilant beast. When he saw Salado again, his tense expression eased. He got up and walked over to Salado. He bowed to Salado. "Wizard Salado." Salado took a puff of his cigarette, pointed at Heath and the other two, and said, "These 3 are the talents I found in the Forgotten Land. Take them in and make some arrangements. I still have some matters to attend to, so I won't go in." "Yes." Salado paused, then turned to the 3 and said, "The 3 of you, each give him a magic stone. If you don't have it, write an IOU. If you have any questions, just ask him directly." "Oh, okay." The 3 of them did as Salado said. Salado left. The young man lowered his head and waited for Salado to leave, then, he turned to the 3 of them and said, "I am Pierre, a middle-level apprentice of the Shadow Tower. Welcome to the Shadow Tower. I will take you to go through the procedures to enter the tower. If you have any questions, you can ask me directly. Probably because he had received the magic stones, Pierre looked very enthusiastic. Okay. Thank you. After a brief exchange of pleasantries, Ender began to ask questions first. He looked at the tower in front of him and said, Wizard Pierre, are there many people in the Shadow Tower? Just call me apprentice. The title cannot be messed up, Pierre corrected him. After a pause, Pierre answered with a proud tone, of course. Our Shadow Tower is the largest wizard organization in the entire Underdark Trezia. There are at least thousands of wizards, formal apprentices, and informal apprentices. Ender widened his eyes and said, thousands of people? Are there really so many talented people? Pierre said, there's nothing strange about it. The old land is not an elemental dry land like the Forgotten Land. The probability of nurturing elemental constitutions is much higher than your side. A place like the Ike continent, which did not have any wizards, was also known as the Forgotten Land. It's also much easier for us to test our innate constitutions than your Forgotten Land. More than a dozen human kingdoms in the surrounding area send an endless stream of apprentices every year. Ender suddenly understood. I see. Heath asked, I just heard you say formal apprentices and informal apprentices? What do you mean? Pierre explained, there is a big difference between the two. Formal apprentices are carefully taught by instructors. The knowledge does not cost money, and there is a magic stone allowance every month. They just need to focus on their training. As for informal apprentices, they have to rely on themselves for everything. They have to pay for the spell models, training resources, experimental materials, witch tools, and even food and lodging. In addition, there is no specific instructor to teach them. They can only learn in the public classes that are occasionally held in the tower, and most of them can only be taught at a cost of magic stones. The three of them looked at each other. Ender asked, then are we considered official apprentices or unofficial apprentices? Pierre smiled and said, what do you think? The three of them did not look too good. Pierre comforted them, it's nothing. I'm also an unofficial apprentice. The apprentices who join the tower are all unofficial apprentices. But as long as they perform well and get noticed by a certain teacher, they can be accepted as official apprentices. Also, you don't have to worry too much about training resources. There are a lot of tasks in the tower every day. As long as you are willing to work hard, it's easy to earn magic stones. Everyone's expressions eased a little. Heath asked, then how many official apprentices are there in the Shadow Tower? Pierre thought for a moment and said, well, I haven't counted them in detail. There are about 60 of them. Last year, it seems that Wizard Karen only accepted 3 apprentices. Heath frowned. There were more than 1,000 apprentices, but only 60 of them were official apprentices. This ratio was too small. Ender then asked, what about wizards? How many wizards are there in the Shadow Tower? Pierre said, there are more than 30 official level wizards who belong to us, but most of them have followed the wizard master to explore a secret realm. Now there are only 6 wizards in the tower. After a pause, he smiled and said, don't think that it's too little. We have the most wizards in the entire Underdark Trezia. It's not that easy to become a wizard. You'll find out in the future. In addition, our wizard master is a rank 2 wizard, the most powerful wizard in the Underdark Trezia. Ender asked, is Wizard Salado who brought us here one of them? Pierre shook his head, Wizard Salado is a free wizard in the Underdark Trezia. He is not a member of our Shadow Tower. Ender was surprised, is there a difference between formal and informal wizards? Pierre nodded. More or less. You will know when you become an official wizard. To put it simply, it is not necessary to form an organization to become an official wizard. Therefore, some official wizards do not join organizations. Instead, they act as free wizards. At most, they just put their name on an organization. This is what happened to Wizard Salado. As they spoke, they quickly entered the tower. From the outside, the tower looked a little dilapidated. It was the same for the internal facilities after they entered, and it seemed that very few people cleaned it. There were spider webs and weeds growing on the corners of the walls, and many of the stone steps were covered in moss. Looking at a strange weed in the corner, Heath became curious. Speaking of which, these plants look strange. They should also belong to supernatural substances, right? Can they be extracted? With this thought in mind, he pulled the weed down and silently chanted in his heart, extract. Beep, Extraction successful. Spirit plus 0.01. Heath thought in surprise, it's really possible. Feeling the pure energy surging into his mind, Heath immediately became happy. If the plants here could be extracted, then could the plants outside also be extracted? Along the way, he saw many strange species that he had never seen before. At this moment, Pierre stopped in front of a stone room. Pierre said to Karina, "Take off your mask, miss. We need to register here." "It's not possible to wear a mask." Karina hesitated for a moment and then took off her mask. All of a sudden, Heath and Ender could not help but become curious, and they looked at Karina. From the first time they met at the Whitewater Harbor to the 3 months of drifting on the sea, Karina had always been wearing a mask and looking mysterious. Even after spending so much time together, the two of them had never seen the true face of this girl. Everyone was very curious about what this beautiful Princess Crimson, who was known as the 1 in 1,000 years beauty of the Ike continent, looked like. Karina did not wait long. She quickly took off her mask. Her true face, which had been hidden for a long time, was finally revealed to everyone. At this moment, whether it was Ender, Pierre, or even Heath from the Blue Star, everyone's eyes lit up. Chapter 19, Inheritance. So beautiful. This was what they were thinking about at the moment. Karina was a flamboyant type. She had an oval face and delicate facial features. Her eyes were big, and her pupils were a rare red. Her gaze was fierce, and it was obvious that she had a fierce personality. Paired with her tall and slender legs and long wine red hair, she was particularly eye-catching. Seeing that Heath and the other two were staring at her, Karina could not help but glare at them and said, "Have you seen enough? If you look again, be careful that your eyes will be gouged out." Karina was not joking. She had indeed done something similar in the palace. Ender snorted softly and turned his head away. Pierre suddenly said, "You're a very beautiful girl. Do you still have your virginity? You can try it in the trading area. Maybe you can sell it for a good price." Ender laughed. Karina looked embarrassed. What did he think she was? A lowly prostitute? Pierre saw her expression and could not help but shake his head. He explained, "In the world of wizards, a beautiful appearance is worthless. You will find out in the future. Okay, let's go in and register." They received 4 items in the registration room: a storage bag that could store 2 cubic meters of items, an apprentice's cloak with the crest of the tower, an apprentice's handbook that recorded the rules and regulations of the tower, and a nameplate that recorded their identities. After the registration, Pierre led them to the dormitory. It was called a dormitory, but in fact, it was just a few dilapidated houses around the tower. Unofficial apprentices could only live outside the tower, and official apprentices could only live in the tower. Pierre said, "This place is very wide. You can choose whichever one you like as long as there is no one. Then during this period of time, you should first familiarize yourself with the environment." Recently, apprentices have been joining the tower one after another. After a period of time, when the number of people is about to be enough, there will be a wizard who will teach you meditation techniques. At that time, you can officially start your training. All right. Then I'll be leaving first. If there are any other problems, you can look for me at the entrance of the valley. I'm usually on guard there. If I'm not there, then I'm receiving apprentices. Just wait for a while." Pierre quickly left. Ender looked at the shabby wooden house in front of him and said with a bitter expression, "Is this the kind of place we live in? My pigsty is even more luxurious than this." He said angrily, "We are here to be wizards. How can this be worse than being slaves?" Karina snorted. "If you are not satisfied, you can leave. No one will stop you." Then, she went into a room. Ender cursed in a low voice, "Self-righteous bitch. Sooner or later she will become someone else's female slave." After a pause, he turned to Heath and said, "Brother Heath, are you going to eat something? Let's hurry up and have 2 good meals. I heard from Pierre that he will start training officially in 2 days. It will cost magic stones to eat. Damn it, they're a bunch of vampires." Heath said, "You go first. I'm not hungry yet. I'm going to take a look around." Okay. After Ender left, Heath walked to a patch of grass beside him. There were some plants on the ground. There were sunflowers with smiling faces, grass that looked like windmills, pure black chrysanthemums, and so on. Heath picked them up and extracted them one by one. Beep, extraction successful. Spirit plus 0.01. Beep, extraction successful. Agility plus 0.02. Beep, extraction successful. Vitality plus 0.01. Heath was overjoyed. Sure enough, they could all be extracted. He looked at the strange plants that filled the mountains and plains in the valley, and the joy in his eyes grew stronger. In the next few days, Heath stayed in this valley, looking around for strange plants to extract. Many of the materials here did not exist in the Ike continent. Each of them could extract a large number of attributes. During this process, Heath's strength had also increased significantly. Attributes: Strength 12.1, Agility 12.3, Vitality 11.9, Spirit 1.6. Strength and agility both broke through 12. Vitality was only one step away from 12. It could be considered as stepping into the advanced knight class. In addition, his spiritual power had also increased a lot, reaching 1.6. Although he did not know what level this was among wizards, it should not be considered low among ordinary people. In this way, more than half a month had passed. Heath had extracted all the vegetation around him. At this moment, the notice of the Shadow Tower summoning them had arrived. Shadow Tower, Inheritance Hall. More than 30 people had gathered in the spacious hall. There were men and women, all between the ages of 13 and 16. These were the apprentices who had recently joined the Shadow Tower, a total of 36. They would be waiting here to receive the wizard's inheritance. Day. 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 A series of footsteps sounded. Not long after, 2 people walked in. The leader was a very old witch. Her large hawk nose was very eye-catching, and she wore a pointed high hat on her head. A young girl followed beside her. The girl was carrying a wooden plate covered with a black cloth. The 3 of them came to the lectern in front of them. The old witch said, "I'm Witch Cassandra. I'm in charge of teaching you the basic knowledge of cultivation. Now that I've started, you should pay attention. The so-called cultivation means that through some special methods, we can gradually change ourselves and obtain greater strength and a longer lifespan. This method, we call it meditation." Witch Cassandra explained the basic knowledge of cultivation. Generally speaking, there was an energy particle called element in this world. Through meditation, wizards could absorb these elemental particles into their bodies, and through these elemental particles, they could change the body's cellular structure to obtain extraordinary spells, long lifespan, and so on. Alright, these are all the contents of the training. Debbie, give them the scrolls. The girl next to her opened the black cloth on the wooden plate. Underneath it was neatly stacked scrolls made of sheepskin. She walked down and handed the scrolls to each apprentice. Witch Cassandra said, "This is the basic meditation chapter. Everyone receives a scroll. The specific meditation method is recorded on it. If you listened carefully to what I said just now, you should be able to understand it. It doesn't matter if you can't understand it. You can pay 2 magic stones for other apprentices to teach you. Many apprentices in the trading zone are willing to accept this job. Just give 2 magic stones. Don't give too much." Heath took the scroll and silently chanted in his heart, "Extract." Beep, extraction successful. Obtained the Knowledge Apprentice Meditation Manual. Large chunks of unfamiliar information flooded into his mind, and his entire head felt sore. There was already a lot of unfamiliar knowledge in his mind, which was the content related to meditation. There were some parts of what Witch Cassandra said that he did not understand, and now it was clear. "I see. Is this the principle of meditation?" After the scroll was distributed, Witch Cassandra took out a crystal ball and placed it on the table. She said, "You have one more free test. I'll give you a detailed test of your spiritual power, talent, elemental affinity, and I'll give you some training advice. Of course, you can follow whatever you want. Alright, line up and come one by one." The apprentices lined up one by one and went forward to test. The content of the test was similar to the test done by Wizard Salato. Only this time, the fog in the crystal ball was more uniform in color, and it would even turn into numbers. The first girl finished the test very quickly. Innate Spiritual Force 1.1, very good. Wizard Talent is medium, affinity to water, positive energy. Recommended to walk in the direction of water and life. Alright, next. The second boy went up. Innate Spiritual Force 0.9, not bad. Wizard's Talent is medium, affinity with wind, space. I suggest wind, position direction. Innate spiritual force 0.6, a little bit less. Wizard's talent is high. Innate spiritual force 0.8, not bad. The apprentices went up one by one, and soon it was Ender and Karina's turn. Ender's innate spiritual force was 0.9. His wizard talent was high, and his affinity was earth. Cassandra suggested that he walk in the direction of earth and nature. Karina's innate spiritual force was 1.2. Her wizard talent was also high, and her affinity was fire. There was also a small incident when she was testing Karina. Because her 1.2 spiritual force was the highest among the apprentices, she was praised by Cassandra. Innate spiritual power 1.2, very good. Very few apprentices can have such high innate spiritual power. You should have a wizard bloodline, right? Karina said, it's my father. Cassandra nodded. What a lucky girl. Wizards and mortals generally don't give birth to life that easily. She paused, looked at Karina's red eyes, and said, red eyes, affinity with fire elements. You may have the bloodline of the Phoenix or Everett. Your talent is not bad. If you work hard, you may get results. Come on, little girl. If you can become an advanced apprentice in 10 years, you can come to me. I will give you a chance to be my student. Cassandra's words caused a stir in the crowd. Everyone was envious. Karina happily said, all right, which Cassandra? All right, next. Karina went down. Heath, who was at the back, walked up and placed his hand on the crystal ball. Not long after, a cloud of smoke rose from the crystal ball and gradually turned into a small row of numbers. Cassandra said, innate spiritual power, 1 point. Halfway through her sentence, she suddenly widened her eyes. The old witch opened her mouth and said in surprise, 1.6. Chapter 20, Meditation. 1.6. Really? That's too high. Monster. I'm only 0.9. I thought 1.1 was high. Is this guy a pervert? The crowd was shocked. Which Cassandra also said in disbelief, I've lived for more than 200 years and I've never seen such a high level of innate spiritual power. It's even more rare for pure bloods. Everyone thought that it was the limit for such a human to have 1.5 innate spiritual power. After a pause, she suddenly said, I really want to cut you open to see what's going on. Heath's hair stood on end, and he immediately put one hand on the crossguard sword. Which Cassandra laughed and said, ha ha ha, I'm just joking. The Shadow Tower is not a dark wizard organization, so there's no need to be so crazy. This is a place that obeys the rules. As long as you follow the apprentice's handbook, no one will do anything to you. Heath was finally relieved. However, he still reminded himself to be more careful in the future. It was enough to get benefits if he exceeded the average level properly. He couldn't be too ostentatious. Which Cassandra's gaze continued to return to the crystal ball. The direction of affinity is also good. Fire, control, and darkness. I suggest you choose one or two directions to learn. The energy of a wizard is very precious. Wizard's talent. Talent is a little bad, only low grade. Hearing this, the crowd could not help but laugh in schadenfreude. Which Cassandra said unhappily, what are you laughing at? What are you laughing at? Do you think you are so great just because you have a high-grade talent? Those who don't have a high-grade talent are all grasshoppers on the same level. No one should laugh at anyone. Regarding talent, Pierre had briefly introduced it to Heath and the others. Wizards divided talent into 5 levels, low grade, medium grade, high grade, excellent grade, and superior grade. At this time, an apprentice asked, Madam Witch, are there no differences between low grade and high grade talent? Cassandra sneered and said to the apprentice, before advancing to a wizard, there's basically no difference. As for after becoming a wizard, wait until you reach that level first. The apprentices seemed to understand, but not really. Cassandra then said to Heath, work hard, child. You have more advantages than everyone else. As long as you don't slack off, you'll reach the advanced apprentice faster than any of them. Heath said in a neither servile nor overbearing manner, thank you for your teachings. Cassandra's eyes showed a little appreciation. She glanced at the cross-shaped sword at Heath's waist and suddenly asked, cross-shaped sword? Have you received knight training? Have you advanced to a knight? Heath nodded. Yes. The crowd once again cried out in surprise. Even in the old land, such a young knight was very rare. Cassandra nodded slightly. Not bad. After a pause, she continued, I happen to have a job that suits you very well. Go to the forest and hunt 100 giant spiders. I need their legs to do some experiments. I'm willing to pay 1 magic stone for each of them. Are you interested? The most up-to-date novels are published on Fruit Noello. The apprentices were extremely envious. Heath quickly said, of course. He had also gone to the mission area to understand the situation of the mission. He knew that the mission given by Cassandra was definitely a high-quality mission for apprentices like them. Probably because she liked Heath more, Cassandra took out another map and handed it to Heath. Remember to be careful when you go out on a mission. Don't go to the places marked red on the map. Be careful of danger. Also, be careful of other apprentices. There are a lot of people who are restless here. The test continued until the end. After class. Have you guys figured out how to meditate? Of course not. Which Cassandra talks so fast, who knows what she said? Ah? Then what should we do? What else can we do? We should go back and think about it. Otherwise, would we really offer 2 magic stones for someone to teach us? I only have 10 magic stones with all my money, okay? At least you still have 10 magic stones. I don't even have any money for dinner yet. You're bragging. The apprentices were all complaining incessantly. Cassandra had spoken too quickly before, so no one could understand what she had said. Ender frowned and said, Heath, do you understand? Heath nodded. It's not bad. Ender said in surprise, really? You can understand her even though she spoke so quickly. Heath said, there are some things that I need to ponder over later, but I think it shouldn't be a big problem. Ender quickly said, really? Then later, if you understand it, can you teach me? If you give it to me, I'll pay you magic stones according to the price. Heath said, I can teach you, but forget about magic stones. Along the way, Ender also told him a lot of things about the wizard world. It could be said that he told him everything he knew. Ender laughed and said, haha, alright then, I'll help you publicize it. After returning to the dormitory, Heath first completed meditation, and then began to explain to Ender. With his help, Ender quickly understood the principle of meditation, and also successfully completed the meditation. Ender was pleasantly surprised, and he praised Heath repeatedly, my God, Heath, you're really a genius. You're really an amazing genius. I'll definitely help you publicize it, I'll definitely help you publicize it. It was already the second day after Cassandra finished her lecture. After a night of pondering, the apprentices still had no clue. Some of them had already decided to give up on building a car behind closed doors and decided to find someone to teach them. It was at this time that after Ender's promotion and his successful case, the apprentices immediately went to find Heath. Heath was also very straightforward and agreed to explain to them. Of course, this time it was for a fee. But for the sake of the same period, Heath only charged them 1 magic stone each, which was half the market price. After these apprentices succeeded, the rest of the apprentices also came to find Heath one after another. But not every apprentice was so honest as to pay the magic stone to listen to his explanation. For example, a few female apprentices. Apprentice Heath, I'm penniless. Can we change the payment method? As long as you teach me, I'll live here today. They deliberately changed into revealing clothes and carefully picked a time when Heath was alone in his room to come to him. They suggested to him to change the payment method, either by name or in secret. Heath rejected them all. Every apprentice here was personally sent by the local nobles before they left. He did not believe that the nobles would let such a precious talent go on the road without any money and could not even afford a magic stone. As he got to know more about the wizard world, he had become more and more aware of the importance of magic stones. It was too cheap to want to exchange magic stones for just a little physiological service. After being defeated by Heath, some female apprentices chose to obediently pay the magic stones, while others secretly went to find other male apprentices who had received Heath's explanation. However, although these male apprentices learned meditation from Heath, it was another matter to take it out and explain it. With their current level of knowledge, it was impossible for them to explain it clearly. This caused the female apprentices to be slept with for no reason. In the end, they had to obediently return to Heath to learn. The most exaggerated female apprentice had even changed 5 boys in a row. In the end, Ender couldn't stand it anymore. Seeing that she was going to find the 6th one, he had no choice but to come and plead with Heath. Heath also felt that it was too disgusting, so he gave her a waiver. She was not even willing to pay a single magic stone, yet she still went to this extent. This was really enough. The girl was indifferent. She even smiled at Heath and said, "In that case, thank you, Apprentice Heath. If you ever need me to pay, you can come to me anytime." She seemed to be enjoying it very much. At the same time, there were 36 apprentices. Ender and the girl were free. Karina also did not come. Not only did she not come, she even publicly despised Heath's teaching ability. Look for him to learn? With his level, aren't you afraid of teaching him a problem? Under her influence, there were still 2 apprentices who did not come, so there were a total of 5 who did not come. The remaining 30 all came to Heath's place to pay magic stones to ask for advice. In an instant, Heath earned 30 magic stones. He accepted 25 of these 30 magic stones and gave 5 to Ender. Other people had been busy promoting him for so long, and he had earned so much. He should at least get some benefits, right? An iron rooster who did not spend a single cent would not last long. The matter came to an end. A week later, the apprentices had learned to meditate and began their own cultivation journey. At the same time, Heath also brought his cross sword and began his first hunting mission since coming to the Shadow Tower. Chapter 21, Low Level. Between apprentice and wizard, they needed to meditate on the basic will runes in their spiritual sea. There were a total of 13 basic will runes, and the apprentice period was divided according to the number of runes meditated. It was roughly divided into 5 stages: elementary, 0-3, low, 4-6, intermediate, 7-9, advanced, 10-12, and peak, 13. When an apprentice meditated and produced a rune, they could start learning spells. Elementary apprentices could learn 3 spells, and the total number of spells they could master during the apprentice period was no more than 20. 3 months later, in the Shadow Tower, in the swamp. Clang! Clang! The sound of metal interweaving echoed. In the forest, a man and a beast were fighting fiercely. It was a black-haired youth, and his opponent was a fire-kissed forest python that was as thick as a man's thigh. The cross-shaped sword slashed through the scarlet scales, leaving many wounds. The fire-kissed forest python that was in pain twisted its huge snake tail and lashed at Heath while opening its huge mouth and spitting out lines of fire at him. After the 2 sides fought for nearly 10 minutes, Heath finally seized the opportunity and jumped to the top of the fire-kissed forest python's head. Black Dragon pierced the top of its head through its jaw and nailed it to the ground. The fire-kissed forest python's huge body struggled crazily for a while before it stopped breathing. Phew! After wiping the blood off his face, Heath started to pant. As expected of a level 0 intermediate demonized beast. It really has some skills. After coming to the Shadow Tower, Heath had a more detailed understanding of the grades of demonized beasts. According to the grades, they were divided into 0-9 grades. Each grade was roughly divided into 5 stages. Elementary, low, intermediate, advanced, and peak, just like the apprentice period. The comparison of strength was also similar to that of an apprentice. A level 0 intermediate was equivalent to an intermediate apprentice, which was much stronger than the advanced demonized beast in the Ike continent. After a short rest, Heath walked up and placed one hand on the cold corpse of the fire-kissed forest python. Extract. Beep, extraction successful. Spirit plus 0.02. Attributes, Strength 13.2, Agility 13.6, Vitality 12.8, Spirit 2.9. Heath's gaze swept across the attributes list, his gaze finally stopping at Spirit 2.9. This was the result of his 3 months of hard work. He had also meditated 3 will runes in his spiritual sea, reaching the peak of the elementary level. He was just a step away from becoming a low-level apprentice. Another 2 or 3 demonized beasts should be able to advance to a low-level apprentice. Heath was silently looking forward to it. Then, he took out a dagger and dug out the 2 fangs in the heart of the fire-kissed forest python. This was the most valuable part of the fire-kissed forest python's body, which could be sold for 5 or 6 magic stones. As for the rest of its huge body, it was worthless. He threw it in the swamp and gave it to the other demonized beasts in the swamp as food. Then, he got up and continued to search for other targets, ready to break through the shackles of a low-level apprentice in one go. After exploring for a few minutes, Heath found the secretion of a grey lizard on the ground. This demonized beast was on the same level as the fire-kissed forest python, and it was also a spirit type, so it was very easy to extract spiritual power. Heath was about to track it down, but at this moment, He heard footsteps not far away, and he could vaguely hear voices. Someone's here. Heath immediately jumped onto a thick tree nearby and used the dense branches to hide himself. There was no detection spells set up by wizards in the swamp, so it was a place that wizards could not monitor. In addition, it intersected with other wizard organizations, so it was not safe to mix with people. There were always apprentices who mysteriously disappeared here. Not long after, 2 men carrying a young girl came over. The 2 men were in their 20s. They were both wearing the Shadow Tower's apprentice cloaks. The young girl they were carrying looked to be 15 or 16 years old. She was naked, and her eyes were wide open as she died. Seeing the 2 male students, Heath could not help but frown. He knew these 2 people. They were the Grimm brothers. They were very disgusting brothers. The 2 walked to the edge of the swamp and threw the girl's body into a swamp. They started to laugh without restraint. Haha, this silly girl really thought that we would let her go. Isn't that right? The moment when she was strangled to death was really awesome. Ah? Is that so? Let's try to find another female apprentice another day. The 2 of them laughed and left. After the 2 of them were far away, Heath came down from the tree trunk. He glanced at the girl who was slowly sinking in the swamp and couldn't help but curse in a low voice, "Scum." The Grimm brothers were absolutely notorious among the apprentices. The 2 of them joined the tower a few years earlier than Heath and the others. Because an official apprentice was of the same race as them, the 2 of them relied on this relationship to climb up to this thigh. After that, the 2 of them began to behave atrociously in the tower, extorting, blackmailing, and forcing female apprentices to have sex. They did whatever they wanted. There was a huge difference between an official apprentice and an unofficial apprentice here. The unofficial apprentices, the tower basically didn't care about them, and behind the official apprentice stood the wizard himself. From this, one could see their power. Looking at the girl's wide-opened eyes, there was still fear and disbelief. She probably did not think that the 2 brothers would really kill her. To be honest, Heath was also slightly surprised. The tower strictly forbade apprentices to kill each other. He thought that no matter how crazy the 2 were, they would not cross the bottom line. However, he did not expect them to still do it, and judging from this familiar situation, it was obviously not the first or second time. It seems that I have to be more cautious in the future. Heath silently reminded himself. Then, he walked up and placed his palm on the girl's cold corpse. At the same time, he silently chanted in his heart, "Extract." Beep, extraction successful. Spirit plus 0.03. At the same time, the 2.9 that had been paused for a long time on the data list changed again. It was replaced by the number 3. At the same time, a pure energy surged into his spiritual sea. Under the sweeping of this energy, a shimmering mysterious rune slowly appeared in his spiritual sea. The shackles of a beginner apprentice were broken at this moment. He had officially entered the low-level stage. I thought I would need at least 2 or 3 demonized beasts to break through. I didn't expect it to be so early. Heath was overjoyed. The extraction continued. After the notification sound of his spiritual power increasing, a notification sound followed. Beep, extraction successful. Wizard talent plus 1. Current wizard talent, 2. Rating, low. His talent had also increased. This is really double happiness. Then, he raised his hand to caress the girl's face and closed her eyes. At the same time, he comforted her, "Go in peace. If there is a chance in the future, I will help you take revenge." The girl's body quickly sank into the swamp. Heath immediately left the swamp and returned to the tower. After returning to the Shadow Tower, Heath walked straight to the trading area, ready to buy his first spell model. An apprentice could learn spells after meditating a rune. But because he did not want to be too ostentatious, Heath had been suppressing the impulse to taste the fun of spells and did not go to learn spells for a long time. However, Heath felt that it was time. 3 of the apprentices in the same period had already meditated on the first rune and learned spells. He would not attract too much attention if he bought a model to learn spells now. He came all the way to the spell sales area. Heath was ready to go in and choose a spell that suited him, but at this moment, a shout rang in his ear. "Heath!" Heath turned his head and saw a tanned, average-looking male apprentice walking towards him. This was Wesley, one of his fellow apprentices. There were 2 beautiful female apprentices beside Wesley, both of whom entered during the same period as him. One of them was called Jenny, and the other was called Molly. The three of them walked over and bowed to each other. Wesley said, "You came here to buy a magic model as well? So, you've also meditated on runes?" Heath nodded. Not long ago. He could clearly feel Jenny and Molly's eyes burning with passion as they looked at Heath. Wesley said, "Congratulations, I've also just meditated on runes. Now, 5 of us have meditated on runes at the same time." After a pause, he laughed and said, "Haha, we were just guessing who the next person to meditate on runes would be. Jenny and Molly guessed that it would be Duncan, but I thought it would be you. After all, you've worked so hard. There's no reason not for you." Heath said, "Is that so? Thank you." Jenny explained in a whimsical manner, "I also guessed that it would be Heath's, all right? I only guessed Duncan because I was bewitched by Molly." Molly rolled her eyes. "Stop it. You were the one who suggested to guess Duncan first." The two of them started arguing for no reason. Wesley said, "Jenny and Molly came with me to buy a spell model. We agreed to take a day off. Everyone will have something to eat in the house and play cards. Do you want to come?" After a pause, he asked the two girls, "Is there any objection to inviting Heath to join us?" Jenny blushed and said, "What objection can there be to playing cards?" Molly did not speak, but her expression was tacitly in agreement. Wesley could not help but laugh. He winked at Heath and said, "I promise you won't be disappointed. How about it?" Chapter 22, Magic. "Are you sure you don't want to go, Heath? You know what I mean, right? The girls have already accepted it. This kind of opportunity is not easy. That's really a pity. I thought we could spend a happy rest day together. Oh right, there's one more thing." Heath was about to leave, but was stopped by Wesley. He said, "The Grimm brothers are looking for you recently. I hope you can be mentally prepared." Heath was stunned. "Looking for me?" He did not feel that he had any interaction with the Grimm brothers. Wesley nodded. "Yeah, probably because you often go to the purchasing station to sell materials. Many people know that you've earned quite a lot of magic stones." Heath frowned. In fact, he was on guard against this. Over the past 3 months, most of the materials he had hunted were still piled up in his spatial pocket. He had only taken out less than a third of them to sell. It was not that he did not want to sell fewer materials, but any less would affect his cultivation progress. After all, he had to buy some cultivation resources such as meditation water. Heath nodded and said, "Okay, thank you for your reminder, Wesley." Wesley kindly advised, "They just want magic stones. If they want some, give them some. Those two scumbags should not be provoked." Heath said, "Okay." After saying that, Wesley left with Jenny and Molly. A cold light flashed in Heath's eyes. There was no such thing as extortion, and it was impossible for it to only happen once. He had already kept a low profile as long as it did not affect his cultivation progress, but he did not expect to still be targeted. In that case, it was better to strike first. Thinking to himself, Heath walked towards the magic sales area. He came to the innermost stone room. There was a sign on the stone room that read, "Magic Hut." This was the magic purchasing point designated by the Shadow Tower. All spells could only be purchased here. It was forbidden for apprentices to trade privately and teach each other spells privately. Once it was discovered, it would be traced back to the source and they would be directly executed. Heath walked in. There was an old man who looked to be in his 70s or 80s sitting in front of the counter. This was the official apprentice Plank. Sensing that someone was approaching, Plank stopped meditating and said, "Unfamiliar face." Heath replied, "I just came here 3 months ago." As he spoke, he took out his identification card and handed it over. Plank took the card and checked it. After confirming that it was correct, he asked, "What kind of spells do you want to see? What level?" Heath said, "I want to see the low-level zero circle spells in the 3 directions of fire, control, and darkness. Those below the low-level apprentice level could only learn low-level zero circle spells at most." Plank took out a scroll from under the counter. When the scroll was opened, there was a dense list of spells. He introduced, "If you want to know which spell, touch the name with your hand. There will be a demonstration." As he spoke, he operated once and touched a Windblade spell. The scroll immediately shot out a beam of light, and a demonstration of the Windblade spell appeared in the middle of the beam of light. Plank then pointed to a chair not far away. "Sit there and look through. Come and find me when you've made your choice." Pausing for a moment, he suddenly asked, "Oh right, low-level 0 circle spells each cost 800 magic stones. Have you prepared the magic stones?" Heath nodded. "I'm ready." He had 3,000 magic stones on him, which he had saved up from his recent missions. He had calculated it carefully. It was just enough to cover his expenses without leaving too much money on him. Otherwise, he could have earned more. Plank looked at Heath in surprise. Young people are quite hard-working. Hard work is a good virtue. It was rare to see an apprentice who could earn that many magic stones in 3 months after entering the academy. "Thank you," said Heath. Holding the scroll, Heath went to the chair next to him and began to choose carefully. After a round of selection, he quickly identified 3 targets. They were: 1 fire-type fireball spell, able to cast a fireball to cause damage to the enemy. 2 darkness-type sleeping eye, able to inject spiritual power into the eye and cause the enemy to fall into a state of sleep by looking into each other's eyes. 3 control-type wizard's hand, able to form an invisible arm to take things. After choosing his spell, Heath came to the counter. "I've chosen these 3. Plank took the scroll and looked at it, then took out 3 spell scrolls from the cabinet. He then handed the scroll to Heath. "Tear off the seal and you won't return it. If you change your mind before then, you can come to me for a refund, but only 80%. "All right, take out the magic stones." Heath handed the magic stones to Plank and left with the scroll. After returning to the house, he did not open the seal. Instead, he picked up the fireball scroll and tried it. Extract. Beep, extraction failed. The substance cannot be extracted. Heath frowned. As expected, it can't be extracted. At first, he thought that he could use the extraction function to buy magic for free. It seemed that wizards were all protected. Then, he tore open the seal and used the extraction again. Beep, extraction successful. Obtain spell model, fireball spell. Large sections of unfamiliar runes, permutation formulas, and character combinations surged into Heath's spiritual sea and formed a 3-dimensional spell model in his spiritual sea. After a while, his swollen head slowly calmed down. Heath rubbed the space between his eyebrows and said excitedly, "So that's how it is. Is this the principle of spells?" As he said that, he raised his hand and softly chanted, "Fireball spell." Immediately, a red light spot suddenly lit up in his palm. A large amount of scarlet-red fire elements rolled over from all directions, twining around the red light spot and spinning rapidly. The hot air became more and more intense, and then, bang! A soft sound was heard. A fireball the size of a basketball burned fiercely in Heath's palm. Heath was overjoyed. It's done. Having lived 2 lifetimes, this was the first time he had experienced supernatural power personally. He had to admit that the feeling of holding power in his hands was really great. From now on, he had stepped into the supernatural realm. Heath was a person with strong mobility. Since he had decided to make a move against the Grimm brothers, he began to make preparations without delay. For the next week, he stopped going out hunting and stayed in the living area of the tower. While looking for a middleman who could negotiate with the Grimm brothers, he secretly investigated everything related to the Grimms, including their strength, spells, preferences, and so on, waiting for an opportunity. Under Heath's careful investigation, he quickly figured out the Grimm's life patterns and was lucky to find a plan they would carry out in a few days. They were going to ambush a person. After careful analysis, Heath decided to play along with the plan. He would use this opportunity to get rid of the brothers once and for all. Therefore, he went to the mission area a day earlier and accepted a mission to hunt high-level demonized beasts. He used this mission as a pretext to purchase a large number of magic potions, disposable scrolls, and so on. The next morning, Heath, who had arranged everything in advance, ran to the entrance of the mission area and waited before dawn. Everything went smoothly. At dawn, the target that the Grimm brothers wanted to ambush appeared at the entrance of the mission area. Just as he entered the mission area, the Grimm brothers followed closely behind him. After the 2 of them entered, the corners of Heath's mouth curled up into a sneer. Then he immediately followed the 2 of them. Chapter 23, Ambush. The Grimm brothers followed the target while Heath followed the Grimm brothers. The group arrived at a secluded valley to the east of the mission area. This valley was called the Mushroom Valley. The valley was filled with all kinds of strange mushrooms. One of these mushrooms was called the morning mushroom. They only grew in the morning and would shrink back into the soil after 10 o'clock. This kind of mushroom was a relatively common material, and the reward for the mission was not bad. If one put in a little effort, they could probably earn 10 magic stones in a busy morning, which was equivalent to the income of some ordinary missions for a whole day. However, because they had to get up too early and work too hard, very few apprentices were willing to do this mission. Therefore, the Mushroom Valley was also a secluded place all year round. At this moment, a figure walked into Mushroom Valley. With a graceful figure, a beautiful appearance, and long wine-red hair, it was Heath's companion from his hometown, Karina. After accepting the mission, Karina held a special bamboo basket and was ready to start collecting mushrooms in the morning. However, at this moment, there was the sound of footsteps behind her, followed by a strange voice. "Yay! Yay! Yay! Isn't this the beautiful Miss Karina? Why is she here alone so early in the morning? Are you lost?" Karina turned her head and saw the Grimm brothers walking towards her from behind. It was the brother, Jim Grimm, who had just spoken. The smile on her face, which was originally in a good mood, froze. Karina and the Grimm brothers' enmity started when Heath and the others had just joined Shadow Tower 3 months ago. The Grimms were very fond of women. Every time a new apprentice entered the tower, the two of them could not help but carefully select and play with the slightly attractive ones. Wizards were more open-minded in this aspect. In addition, most of them knew that the two of them had the support of official apprentices, so the ordinary female apprentices did not dare to offend them. They basically just endured for a while and thought that they had been bitten by a dog. 3 months ago, when Karina came to the tower, her bright appearance was quickly spread to the ears of the Grimm brothers. Naturally, she was targeted by the two of them. Who would have thought that Karina, whom they had tried everything from threatening and entice her, would cause them to suffer a setback? This arrogant princess did not give them any face at all. She spoke coldly to them and even directly went to the tower's law enforcement team to sue the two of them. Although the two of them were basically fine because they were official apprentices, it made them lose face. After that, Karina was targeted by the two of them. The two of them waited patiently for more than 2 months until the limelight was almost over. Not long ago, they happened to hear that Karina had accepted the mission of Mushroom Valley, so they decided to settle the old and new grudges together. Thus, this scene happened. Karina frowned and ignored them. Instead, she carried the bamboo basket and walked back. However, after taking a few steps, she was stopped by the younger brother, Harry Grimm, who had a smile on his face. "Where are you going? Miss Karina, haven't you completed your mission yet?" As he said that, he reached out his hand and touched Karina's cheek. Karina immediately jumped back like an angry female cat. She raised her eyebrows and shouted, "What are you doing?" Jim Grimm snorted coldly and said in a hostile tone, "Hey? What are you doing? What do you think we can do in this wilderness to stop a little beauty like you?" He chuckled and said, "Of course we can do whatever we want." Karina's expression changed. "I'm warning you. This is the surveillance area of the Shadow Tower. The law enforcement team may come over to patrol at any time. If you hurt me, they won't let you off." The two brothers looked at each other and laughed without any restraint. Harry Grimm sneered and said, "Karina, stop dreaming. To tell you the truth, I've already informed the law enforcement team. No one will come here today. Just give up on this idea." Jim Grimm added, "Since we dare to make a move against you, of course we've made ample preparations. Now, we'll give you 2 choices. Either you take the initiative and let us brothers have a good time, and we'll let you live." After a pause, he bluntly said, "Or, die." Karina angrily said, "The ones who deserve to die are you." After saying that, she instantly took out a short-handled staff that she had just purchased and waved it in front of her. A fireball instantly whistled and flew toward the Grimm brothers. Putting aside character and ability alone, Karina was absolutely outstanding among the students of the same period as Heath and the others. After entering the tower for just over a month, she had already meditated 1 rune, which was not much slower than Heath who had the system. She was the fastest among her peers. However, compared to the Grimm brothers who had entered the tower for several years and were about to reach the intermediate level, the gap was still too far. "Humph, N.A.V.E. Jim Grimm snorted coldly. With a wave of his hand, a water shield was deployed in front of him. The fireball hit the water shield with a sizzling sound. A cloud of black smoke rose and extinguished. Harry Grimm took out his staff and waved it forward. A long whip formed by a hurricane was thrown at Karina in front of him. The two sides soon fought. After a few spells, Karina was quickly bound by a whirlwind summoned by Harry Grimm. Jim Grimm took out a rope and tied her up, then took out a piece of cloth and stuffed it into Karina's mouth. Karina, who was completely restrained, was unable to respond. Her pale face was only left with panic, and large tears fell from her eyes. This pitiful scene immediately aroused the desire of the Grimm brothers. Harry Grimm raised a pair of magic claws and was about to tear off Karina's clothes when Jim Grimm, who was next to him, opened his palm. Jim Grimm said, "This is the surveillance area. First, get her out of the surveillance area. Otherwise, if we leave behind any evidence and we're caught, it will be hard to explain." Harry Grimm nodded in agreement. The two of them immediately made Karina walk out of the valley all the way to a grassland outside the surveillance area. After throwing Karina down, Jim Grimm took out a bottle of magic potion that he had prepared in advance. He pinched Karina's cheek with both hands and pried open her mouth. Then, he poured the magic potion into her mouth. Under the effect of the potion, Karina, who was cursing loudly a second ago, gradually became delirious. It was as if her entire body was itchy. She twisted her body like a water snake, and her mouth continuously let out erotic gasps. Jim Grimm took out a dagger and cut the rope to untie her. Karina, who had regained her freedom, did not think of escaping. She began to tear off her clothes continuously, revealing a large area of snow white that made people's hearts shake. Her mouth let out an emotional moan. Her unparalleled beauty and devilish figure were extremely effective when she made a move. "I'll go first, I'll go first. It was you last time. It's my turn. I heard that this girl is still a virgin. Then let's go together." The Grimm brothers' eyes immediately turned red. Each of them took out a bottle of magic potion and drank it. In no time at all, they threw themselves at this peerless beauty. Just as the curtain was about to be drawn for a good show between two dragons and a phoenix, at this moment, whew! Suddenly, the cold sound of an arrow sounded. "Be careful, Harry." Jim Grimm keenly sensed the danger and hurriedly pushed Harry Grimm away. At the same time, he pulled his hands to the left and right and unfolded a water shield in front of him. In the next second, a sharp arrow exploded on the water shield. There was a glass bottle tied to the arrowhead. After the explosion, the dark green powder inside instantly spread into the water shield. For a moment, there was a loud sound. The entire water shield turned dark green and white smoke rose from it. Jim Grimm's expression changed drastically. "It's poisonous." Seeing that the poisonous water had spread to his hands, he hurriedly withdrew the water shield. And at the instant that the water shield collapsed, the cold sound of arrows exploded once again. Swish! 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 With one or two or three explosive sounds, 3 arrows flew towards him head-on. Jim Grimm turned pale with fright. He hurriedly cast the second defensive spell he had mastered and summoned an oak shield. However, the defensive surface of this defensive spell was very narrow and could only block the front. An arrow shot onto the oak shield with a dong sound. The remaining 2 arrows brushed past the oak shield and flew back. Jim Grimm's expression changed greatly. Only now did he realize that the enemy's target was Harry Grimm, who was behind him from the beginning. He hurriedly shouted, "Harry, quickly dodge!" However, he was still one step too late. Harry Grimm's entire body of spells was focused on offense. He did not have any defense at all, and he was not prepared at the moment. One of the 2 arrows that flew towards him hit his chest, and the other hit his lower abdomen. Harry Grimm screamed, "Ah! Help! Help me! Help me, Jim!" The 2 arrows were also tied to a glass bottle. After the glass bottle exploded, silver powder spilled out and covered Harry Grimm's body. Jim Grimm saw the silver powder, but he could not tell what it was. He thought it was some kind of poison. He didn't have time to think. Seeing that Harry Grimm was seriously injured, he quickly summoned a large healing water ball and floated toward Harry Grimm, wrapping him up. Unexpectedly, as soon as the water ball wrapped Harry Grimm, the silver powder on Harry Grimm's body suddenly glowed and heated up. Seeing this, Jim Grimm's head exploded with a bang. Because this was a low-grade material that every wizard was very familiar with, metal sodium. Before he could react, he heard boom. The water ball exploded with a loud sound. Even Harry Grimm was blown into pieces. Jim Grimm stood rooted to the ground in a daze. Whoosh! A soft sound came from behind. Grimm turned his head and saw a figure behind him. It was a man in black clothes, a mask, and a hood. He couldn't tell if it was a man or a woman. Jim Grimm's eyes turned red and he said angrily, "Who are you? What grudge do you have with us brothers? You want to be so ruthless?" Heath raised his cross sword. "Guess." He jumped up. Chapter 24, Clean Up the Aftermath. A few minutes later. Plop. With a soft sound, Jim Grimm's body fell to the ground with his face facing the sky. There was a large hole in his chest, and his heart was torn into pieces. He stared at the dense branches and leaves above his head with wide eyes. Heath wiped the blood on his face, spat to the side, and cursed in a low voice, "Tch. Damn it, he's so hard to kill." Jim Grimm had mastered 2 defensive spells, 3 healing spells, and solid skin and thick flesh. As long as it was not a fatal blow, he could recover quickly. It really gave Heath a headache. If I didn't kill Harry Grimm first, I might not be able to defeat these 2 brothers. A low-level apprentice is so fierce. I really don't know what level an intermediate-level apprentice is. Heath couldn't help but sigh. The more he understood a wizard, the more he felt that a wizard was terrifying. Shaking off his messy thoughts, Heath walked forward and placed one hand on Jim Grimm's body. He silently chanted in his heart, "Extract." Beep, extraction successful. Spirit plus 0.03. Beep, extraction successful. Obtain spell model, Water Shield. Beep, extraction successful. Obtain spell model Water of Life. Beep, extraction successful. Wizard talent plus 1. Current wizard talent, 3. Rating, low. A series of electronic notifications rang out. 1 attribute, 2 spell models, and 1 talent had been extracted. Heath's eyes could not help but light up, and a look of joy appeared on his face. He had thought that he would only be able to extract 1 spell, but he had not expected there to be 1 more. It seems that the extraction of spells should be random. He guessed silently in his heart. Woo. Ah. I want, at this moment, a seductive voice sounded. Karina, who was far away, had unknowingly crawled to Heath's feet. She twisted her waist and coiled around Heath's body like a water snake. Heath frowned. He raised his hand to strangle her neck, lifted her chin, and looked at her blurred eyes. Sleeping Eye, activate. The 4 eyes intertwined. The dark elements carried Heath's spiritual power and eroded into Karina's spiritual sea through her eyes. Her misty eyes gradually closed, and her body went soft, sliding down from Heath's body. Heath continued to extract. This time, it was Harry Grimm. Unfortunately, Harry Grimm had already exploded into pieces. He tried to find the largest piece of the corpse to extract, but he didn't know whether it was too crushed or some other reason. The notification indicated that the extraction failed. Heath cried out in pity, "If I had known earlier, I would have found another way to kill him. It was a miscalculation." Then, he returned to the last Karina. At this time, Karina had already fallen into a deep sleep under the effects of the sleeping eye. Heath picked up Karina and began to carry out the last part of his plan, which was also the most important part. Dealing with the aftermath. The Grimm brothers were not ordinary apprentices who were unknown. Although they were filled with evil deeds, they were still the official apprentices' right hands. In fact, 90% of the magic stones that they had plundered had actually gone into the official apprentice's pocket. Killing the 2 of them was equivalent to touching the official apprentice's money bag. If he did not do a good job of cleaning up the aftermath, it would be easy to get burned. After all, there was no official apprentice behind him who protected him. Under the premise that no one interfered, Heath felt that the Shadow Tower's law enforcement was still relatively reliable. And because of this, before starting this plan, Heath had naturally made a complete plan on how to clean up the aftermath. Heath carried Karina all the way to the nearest exit from the Underdark Tresia. He put Karina down and threw half of Harry Grimm's severed hand beside her. The apprentice left the Underdark Tresia without permission. No matter what the reason was, it would be treated as a betrayal. As time passed, the effects of the drugs on Karina's body gradually faded. The effects of the sleeping eye also gradually dissipated. Karina, who had been asleep for a long time, slowly woke up. Don't do this! No! A hysterical shout was heard. Karina suddenly stood up. She instantly assumed a defensive posture, and a ball of flame with a quick reaction was ignited in her hand. However, she soon saw that there was nothing in front of her eyes, and there was no trace of the Grimm brothers. "I'm saved!" Just as this thought appeared in her mind, she suddenly saw the half of the arm that had been thrown to the side. It was dripping with blood. Karina was startled and subconsciously took 2 steps back. After taking a step back, she suddenly realized that she was no longer in Mushroom Valley from before. Instead, she was now at the exit of Underdark Tresia. She stopped in her tracks and suddenly seemed to understand something. Karina was arrogant, not stupid. Although she had been high and mighty since she was a wizard, she was used to all kinds of conspiracies and tricks in the palace. Even when she was bored, she had captured a few civilians to let them play a game of killing each other. In order to have fun, she had also carefully designed some plots. Because of this, she quickly figured out the current situation. The current situation was as follows. The Grimm brothers were dead. Whether she killed them or not, it was already related to her. If she returned now, she didn't know how the tower would deal with this matter. But the official apprentice behind the Grimm brothers definitely wouldn't let her go. Instead of going back to be tortured, she might as well just leave this place and go far away. The person who saved her clearly had the same intention by leaving her here. He wanted her to leave and take responsibility for murdering the Grimm brothers. Karina's expression was uncertain and she looked conflicted. She knew it, but she had traveled thousands of miles to come here. Now, she was forced to leave after learning a few spells. It was not easy to make such a decision. Heath said, "Just go. It will be difficult for me if you don't leave." Karina's guess was right. Heath's arrangement was to force her to leave and take the blame. Many apprentices in the tower knew that the Grimm brothers were going to make a move on Karina. At this time, the Grimm brothers disappeared and Karina escaped from the tower. This way, everyone would think that it was Karina who did it, and no one would suspect him. Moreover, the sky was high and the land was wide. As long as Karina escaped, it would be like looking for a needle in a haystack. An official apprentice would not have that much power to reach that far, right? As for the tower. Based on Heath's understanding of the tower over the past few months, it was unlikely that they would make a big fuss for these unofficial apprentices. Heath stared at Karina. It would be best if Karina was willing to take the blame. Otherwise, he would have to carry out the second plan. Then, would Karina be willing to accept this basin of dirty water? The answer was self-evident. After hesitating for a moment, she gritted her teeth, took out a cloak from her dimensional pocket, put it on, and grabbed the magic staff, and left without looking back. There was no need to make any choice. Staying here was undoubtedly a dead end. If she went out, she might be lucky enough to encounter some opportunities. Hiding in the dark, Heath continued to keep an eye on Karina until he confirmed that she had left through the exit. Only then did he relax. There was a magic circle left by the wizards at the exit of the tower. Once an apprentice left, they would leave a record. In addition to the incident with the Grimm brothers, as long as she was not stupid, she would not be able to come back. Of course, to be on the safe side, Heath continued to wait in this area for 2 days until he was completely sure that Karina would not come back. Only then did he get up and leave. Next. It was to see what reaction the tower had. Chapter 25, After the event. Then, Heath pretended that nothing had happened and continued to carry out the mission he had received, hunting high-level demonized beasts. After the hunt, Heath continued to wander in the forest for a few days until he returned to the tower a week later. Walking into the tower, Heath turned his head and carefully observed the expressions of the people passing by, but he saw that everyone was still in a hurry and looked the same as usual. It seems that the tower didn't have any special reaction. That's true. After all, they are just 2 insignificant unofficial apprentices. Wizards don't have the time to care about their lives. Heath felt slightly relieved. Although he had preliminarily confirmed the attitude of the tower, Heath, who was still worried, still wanted to understand the situation in more detail. Therefore, after handing in the mission, he bought a bunch of ingredients and invited a few apprentices from the same period to his house for a barbecue. The fact that Heath, who was a loner, suddenly treating everyone to a meal obviously surprised everyone. However, each of the invited apprentices gave him face. After all, he was one of the 5 apprentices who had already meditated on runes. The few apprentices that Heath invited were of the gossipy type. There was no need for him to deliberately guide them at the dinner table. Someone had already brought up the matter regarding Karina. A girl said, "Oh right, Heath, I remember that Karina came from the same place as you, right?" Heath nodded. "Yes, why?" The girl looked surprised. "You still don't know, right?" She murdered the Grimm brothers and defected from the tower. Heath pretended to be shocked. Is that true? A girl next to him added, of course it's true. Now the whole tower is talking about it. It's said that even wizards have asked about it. Heath frowned. Wizards had also asked about it. It couldn't be that serious, right? He quickly asked, what about the result? The girl said, what other result can there be? That's it. Those two scumbags, the Grimm brothers, deserve to die. Who would waste their energy for them? It's not completely impossible, right? Hasn't the tower strengthened the registration of students to the mission area? There's no time to take care of it. There are so many apprentices who go missing every year. I don't believe that all of them encountered high-level demonized beasts while doing missions. Everyone quickly began to discuss, and Heath smoothly learned more details from it. It was more or less the same as his previous judgment. The death of the Grimm brothers did not cause much of a stir in the tower. It only added a bit of gossip to the apprentices. Some people might have been angry, such as the official apprentice that the Grimm brothers were loyal to, but it was not enough to stand up for them. In the end, they were just two dogs. After they died, they could just find two more. Who would have the leisure to avenge them? In short, the matter passed just like that. The wizards issued a symbolic notice warning the apprentices to follow the rules and register formally. Nothing else happened. Everything was the same as before. Heath's worried heart finally relaxed completely. At this time, a girl asked, Heath, I heard that you killed a high-level demonized beast. Is this true? After the problem was solved, Heath was in a good mood. He smiled and pointed at the delicious food on the table. Then why do you think I invited you to dinner? The apprentices immediately burst into an uproar. They were amazed and envious. It's too amazing. Although it's a beast, it's said that its strength is comparable to that of a high-level knight. It must have earned a lot of magic stones. I really envy you for having the strength of a knight. You can do hunting missions as soon as you come. You don't have to go to the plantation and the gathering area every day like us. Because they did not have the slightest fighting strength, they could only accept the missions of gathering and planting. This part of the mission was also the most tiring. Not only was the reward given little, but it was also very tiring. It was no different from the serfs outside. In comparison, although the hunting mission was a little dangerous, it was much easier. The reward was also high. Moreover, they could hone their spells during battle. It was more than one level higher than gathering and planting. I really hope that I can meditate and produce runes as soon as possible. When I learn spells, I can go and accept hunting missions. Have you accumulated enough magic stones to buy spells? 800 magic stones. It will take more than half a year if I don't eat or drink. When the time comes, lend me some. Once I learn spells and accept hunting missions, I will pay you back very soon. What if you don't pay me back? He, is it a flesh and blood repayment? Bah, shameless. After eating and drinking, everyone began to suggest playing Command, a game similar to Truth or Dare. However, Heath rejected them. He knew what these apprentices were like. On the surface, they were all well dressed, but after drinking a few tales of yellow wine, they were all more open. They took off their clothes and sexually flirted with each other. They could do anything, but after a few rounds, they could turn this place into a sex den. This was where he lived. He did not want to make a mess, and in the end, he had to clean up the scene. In addition, he did have something to do with his cultivation at night. He could not waste his time on these meaningless things. The girls saw that Heath was such a killjoy, so they left one after another. The boys were speechless. Heath, you really don't understand romance. Can't you tell? The girls were very interested just now. Tonight was supposed to be a wonderful night. Heath chased them out. Creak. The door closed. After closing the door and windows, Heath returned to the room and blew out the white candle on the table. He used the moonlight to quietly study the spell he had just obtained today. He raised his hand and with a thought, a small water snake quickly surged into his palm and swayed in his hand. He first tried to control the water snake to turn into a shield, then he took out a small knife to cut a wound for the small water snake to heal. Both spells were successfully completed. Looking at his fingers that were rapidly healing and recovering, Heath exclaimed, the healing spells of water-type spells are indeed powerful. In terms of learning spells, most apprentices would only choose to learn in a direction with strong elemental affinity. This was also the advice that Cassandra gave them when she tested their talents. After all, the higher the affinity, the easier it was to learn. However, Heath did not have this problem. This knowledge did not need to be understood or trained. It could be mastered directly by extracting it. Of course, this did not mean that he could learn whatever he wanted to. The problem of affinity still existed. Some high-level spells could not be learned without sufficient affinity. I wonder if elemental affinity can be extracted. Heath thought greedily. Supernatural powers were addictive. Once one got involved, one would not be able to stop. Every spell in the wizard world was extremely attractive to him now. He really wanted to learn all of them. Forget it, I'll think about it in the future. Now, I should focus on training and improve my strength first. Before I have enough strength, I still have to behave myself. If outsiders find out about my little secret, it won't be worth it. With this in mind, Heath gradually calmed down the greed in his heart. Then, he closed his eyes and began to meditate. Although his strength mainly came from extracting, when he had time, he would also cultivate through normal meditation. It was a little less, but wasn't a grasshopper also meat? Heath was still planning to become an intermediate-level apprentice in half a year. Of course, he had to work harder. Time passed quickly. Half a year passed very quickly. Shadow Tower, Library. Most of the facilities in Shadow Tower were fee-based, and the library was no exception. All the books in it could not be lent out and could only be read inside. The fee was 1 magic stone per hour. At this moment, in the new book section of the library, Heath took the books off the shelf and flipped through 2 pages in his hand. He seemed to feel that it was not appropriate, so he put them back. He looked like he was choosing books to read. But what no one knew was that every time he took the books down and flipped through them, a voice that only he could hear would ring in his ears. Beep, successful extraction. Obtained knowledge, human selection of the old land. Beep, successful extraction. Obtained knowledge, introduction to the human world on the west coast. Beep, successful extraction. Obtained knowledge, selections of the 16 kingdoms at the edge of the forest. Beep, extraction successful. At the same time, large chunks of knowledge from the books surged into Heath's mind. Under the watchful eyes of the crowd, he quietly put the books into his head without missing a single word. Half an hour later, Heath pretended that he had not found a satisfactory book, threw down a magic stone, and left the library. The tower's mission area had a mission to collect book knowledge. Every once in a while, the tower's wizards would sift through the book knowledge collected by the apprentices and update the library's books. At this time, Heath would come to the library and record the knowledge in his mind through extraction. After 8 to 9 months of hard work, the entire library had been emptied by him. In a single round of profound knowledge, even some wizards could not compare to him. Senior Heath. At this moment, a shout came from behind. Heath turned his head and saw a beautiful girl he had never met walking towards him. The girl came in front of Heath, took out a pink invitation card, and handed it to Heath. She lowered her head and said shyly, "I am Anne from Forgotten Land 176. Next week is my birthday. I would like to invite Senior Heath to attend my birthday dinner.